Chapter 971. Copying the data S. No, we don't, Gustav stated with a strong tone. Oh! A wry smile appeared on Amira's face as she let go of the cloth and bit her lower lip in embarrassment. Just don't do anything funny when you have my body. Gustav didn't know why he felt the need to say this. You too don't do anything funny with my body, she rebelled. I am an upright man, Gustav said with a righteous tone. I am an upright woman too, but... Her face turned red as she began to picture some steamy scene in her mind. You don't look very upright right now, Gustav stated with a suspicious tone. Shut up, she said as she snapped out of her thoughts. Let's do it! Her face turned determined as she moved closer to Gustav. H&M. Gustav nodded and reached out to place his hand on her face. Tell me if you start to feel unbearable pain, Gustav said as he activated an ability. Flesh warping has been activated. Wriggling sounds echoed in the room in the next instant, with Amira gritting her teeth with a slight look of discomfort. Many minutes later, the same two people as earlier stood in the room, but unlike before. The male had a female outfit, and the female was wearing an MBO uniform. It's done. Go check a mirror, the lady voiced out. Your face, or rather my face. You have my face already, the man voiced out with a look of disbelief. These two were obviously Amira and Gustav, who now had each other's identities. Amira quickly moved towards the mirror to check her looks, and noticed she had Officer Tantrum's exact body features. A smile appeared on her face. Meanwhile, Gustav stood behind her. We just need to switch clothing now, Gustav voiced out with a girly tone. Gustav had made use of flesh warping to make Amira look like Tantrum, while Gustav had made use of shape-shifting to look like her. It was relatively easy to turn himself to her, but he had struggled with turning Amira to Tantrum. This was the first time he was using flesh warping to turn a live human into someone else. He had only used it on corpses and to blast a live human to pieces, so this one wasn't easy. However, Gustav was able to pull it off because he had built experience using flesh warping regardless. Amira was lucky she wasn't blasted to pieces. After exchanging clothes, they both gave each other final warnings and proceeded to leave the room after deciding to meet here in the next 23 hours. Gustav had everything Amira possessed at the moment. Key cards, money, practically everything in her storage device, while Amira had everything Tantrum possessed in his storage device as well. Gustav wasted no time in moving towards the teleportation elevator at the end of this room. He maintained Amira's usual jolly expression. He instantly took the elevator to the 627th floor. Twai. He arrived there in a second and used a key card to gain access to the floor. Since this floor had limited access, only 1 or 2 scientists could be seen moving about the corridor. When they spotted Gustav, they greeted respectfully with smiles. Gustav greeted back and even engaged in small talks with them, like Amira would before progressing further. Gustav knew exactly where he was going, so he wasted no time in heading towards the southwest corner. In a few he had arrived there, and was now in a very large hall space with rows and columns of floating-looking tabloids. Since it was still midnight, there was practically no one around here. Scientists were always working on one thing or the other, but they also needed rest, so only a few of them would be seen moving about at midnight. But since this floor wasn't accessible to everyone in the first place, nobody could be seen in this part of the floor. Gustav's eyes were focused on a particular part of this space as he walked through the midst of these multiple floating data with different labels. Why does the Bureau confiscate so many research? Gustav wondered as he noted the different categories and names of these confiscated research that sounded like inventions that could really be useful. Gustav understood that some research might spell instability and may be dangerous for the public if allowed to continue, but what about cases like scientists ill? What exactly is their motive for confiscating something that could potentially save the world? Gustav questioned internally because it didn't make sense to him. They should be funding his research so he could find out more about this subject, but they did the opposite. Gustav was intellectual enough to know that scientists ill wasn't the only person this had happened to, so he was sure not every Resich here was dangerous or unstable. The government was just trying to stop it from being furthered. I'll dig into that later when I have the time, Gustav decided as he arrived in front of a section. Interdimensional travel / displacement. Gustav walked in the midst of this category as his eyes swept across the place. He knew exactly where he was going, but he was taking note of these other Resiches that had been confiscated. He noticed that the name of some had a kind of semblance to that of Scientist Ills, but still seemed quite different. He suddenly paused his footsteps as he noticed one by the 5 places to the right. Warp Demolator Theory. Gustav's eyes were locked on this particular one because it was named after a term that had been mentioned in Scientist Zill's Resich. Looks like there are others who might have the same or similar knowledge about this matter with Scientist Zill, Gustav said internally before he kept moving along. In a few seconds, he arrived in front of the one he had been searching for. Planetary placement dimensional theory. Gustav stared at the floating tabloid-shaped item in front with the glowing label above it. System, are you ready? Gustav asked. Way ahead of you. I have began copying the data already, the system responded. Chapter 972. Gathering even more data. Good, Gustav said internally as he stood in place waiting for the system to copy the data completely. According to the system, despite the large amount of data computed within, it would only take a minute. Data successfully copied. The system gave him feedback before long, causing Gustav's eyes to lit up with a gratified look. Is there room to copy one more? Gustav asked as he turned to stare in a particular direction. The Warp Demolator Theory. The system already knew what Gustav had in mind. Yeah, Gustav responded internally. There are at least 4 more Resich in this category with lots of similarities to Scientist Zill research. Should I just copy them all? The system inquired. Yes, we need every bit of information we can get. Who knows if any of them might end up being useful, Gustav said internally. All right, then I will company. While the system was speaking, Gustav sensed someone coming from up ahead. He moved to the side and spotted another scientist coming from up ahead. Gustav knew not to react suspiciously, so he acted like he was inspecting the data in front of him. Young Miss Amira. The person coming from up ahead voiced out as he closed in the distance. He had curly hair and looked no older than 30 with a slightly tanned skin. She's really popular amongst these guys. Gustav nearly face-bombed. It seemed like Amira could not go anywhere without being recognized by the others around here. Hey Arjun, Gustav voiced out with a soft tone as he waved and smiled. It's truly you. I'm surprised to see you on this floor, Scientist Arjun stated. Gustav was able to tell his name because he saw right through the scientist's pocket where his name tag was kept. Amira did mention to him that she was rarely ever seen on other floors, which was the reason for Scientist Arjun's surprised expression. Haha, I just came here to check out some interesting dimensional research, Gustav responded with a light chuckle. Oh, I remember this one. Your mother was adamant on us making more research on it after we confiscated it, Scientist Arjun stated with a reminiscing tone. She was? Gustav voiced out. Yes, so we ended up conducting investigations based on the findings of the scientist who originally started the research, Scientist Arjun responded. So how did it go? Did you guys end up finding out more? Gustav inquired with a look of curiosity. It's still undergoing in another private research facility. The information gathered is not enough, which is why it's taking so long for anything substantial to be discovered. But I don't know why your mother is so adamant on not leaving this particular topic alone, Scientist Arjun revealed. I take after her in that aspect. Once I am interested in a subject, I don't back down till I uncover everything I need to, Gustav said with a smile. Truly, that is a trait of your mother's, haha, Scientist Arjun voiced out before walking away. Nice chatting with you, young miss. Should you need any help, don't hesitate to come ask. His voice trailed off the further away he got. The short dialogue had left Gustav with a lot of thoughts. He wasn't surprised that there were other private facilities owned by the government where they conducted some experiments based on some of the research here. He just didn't think they were doing anything about this particular one. From the looks of things, they still wanted to sweep the theories to one side, but Amira's mother still wanted them to keep researching about this. I might need to have a discussion with her mom. Gustav thought as he moved closer to the next data, he wanted the system to copy. Within an area with green-colored winds blowing about, a 59 kid could be seen moving forward. The skies were made of waves. It was a massive body of water, and weird-looking creatures could be seen swimming in it, while the ground was made of weird-looking cubes that made walking a bit difficult. Up ahead, within a swirling wave of green wind, armor like vest could be seen floating. The cubes surrounding that vicinity were all red in color, and the armor like vest kept sending out a weird discharge of energy. The more the curly black-haired kid closed in on the area of the vest, the intense the energy became. "It's worse than I expected," Endrick voiced out as he slowly moved forward. With every step his foot sank into the cubes, making it a big difficulty to tread forward faster. However, Endrick was not looking to be fast. He knew he had to tread softly, so this speed was not a problem for him. As he reached a proximity of 900 feet from the vest, we could see the vicinity clearer. The red cubes on the ground surrounding that area were not originally red. The stench permeating the green-colored air was one that Endrick was already familiar with. "Blood!" he muttered underneath his breath as he stepped into the circle of red cubes on the ground surrounding the vest. His boots were already getting sticky from the blood-soaked cube area as he took steps forward. The most insane part about all this was that the area of cubes drenched in blood surrounded a radius of more than 3,000 feet, which would make one wonder just how many people or creatures died here. But the most baffling part was there were no bodies in the vicinity or any signs of corpses. The whole place was just drenched in blood from an unknown source. However, Endrick was about to find out why this whole place was drenched in blood. Skreek! Endrick had only taken 3 steps forward on this blood-soaked cube's ground when loud screeches were heard from above. Ugh! He groaned in pain as the sound reverberated loudly across the vicinity. The instant Endrick looked up, his eyes widened in shock. Chapter 973. Endrick's Situation S. Ugh. He groaned in pain as the sound reverberated loudly across the vicinity. The instant Endrick looked up, his eyes widened in shock. The gigantic jaws of an unknown creature was descending from above the sky waters with wide open mouth. The pressure it exhibited was so immense and powerful, Endrick found himself unable to move an inch forward. Each teeth of this creature was as massive in length as a 3-story building, with some being pointed at the tip and others being straight, but it was obvious they were extremely sharp. The instant the creature shut its jaws, a person would be grinded to meat paste. It was enough for their bodies to disappear completely. However, this explained the blood. Endrick gritted his teeth as the creature, dropping from above with speed, was only a few feet from reaching his head level, whereas he was unable to move a muscle. "Telekinesis barrier," Endrick said internally. Bang! The creature suddenly slammed heavily into an invisible barrier that stopped it from descending further down. It made a loud, shrieking voice and repeatedly pummeled on Endrick's telekinesis barrier while Endrick tried to move forward. "My body won't respond." Endrick gritted his teeth as his legs trembled repeatedly from trying to take a step forward. Bang! 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 Is this fear? Endrick didn't think he had it in him to be frightened of something to the point where he was unable to move. Dash! It's a paralyzing energy the Yokias emit when going for their prey. A green dot on his forehead began beeping as this voice rang out. "That makes sense. How do I get rid of it?" Endrick inquired. "Channel your bloodline energy from your belly area and spread it across your body thrice. That should weaken the energy enough for you to take a few steps forward," Huserois instructed. Bang! 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 The sound of the telekinesis barrier starting to crack was heard next. Meanwhile, Endrick was doing as instructed. He suddenly opened his eyes, which were radiating with a weird blue and silver color. Endrick groaned as he forcefully pushed himself forward. Thuwaya! He bolted across a distance of 40 feet in the next instant as the telekinesis barrier was also smashed through. Bomb! The creature slammed into the red cube's area after it broke through the barrier, missing Endrick by a hair length. The instant it made contact with the red cubes, it blasted into smithereens. All of its body part disintegrated while the blood flew in every direction. Endrick found himself soaked in blood as he began to take small steps forward once more. With the creature destroyed, he had regained absolute control over his body and closed in a little bit more of the distance between him and his goal. However, Endrick ensured he didn't let his guard down because he was still in the red zone. Who knew what was next? He didn't doubt there would be more difficult obstacles the closer he got to the floating vest. The Bureau of Cities Research Center. All done? Gustav asked as he stood in front of a particular area. All copied. The system responded. Quest completed. Infiltrate the Bureau of Cities Research Center and get Scientist Zill's confiscated research. Rewards. Gustav stared at the rewards with a satisfied look as the notifications popped up in his line of sight. Now, how do I find her mother? Gustav said internally as he turned around to leave this area. Now that he was done with the mission, he could leave the Bureau at any time, but he needed to know more about what the Bureau had investigated, even though it would make him look suspicious. He felt since he wasn't going to stay here too long, it wouldn't be a problem being suspicious. Time moved very quickly, and before everyone knew it, daybreak had arrived. Gustav had spent the entire midnight in another person's body. He had not used shape-shifting for this long before, but he was powerful enough to maintain it now. His original bloodline could even change other people's physical appearance, which showed it had come a long way from just being able to change colors. He had to admit that his original bloodline might be one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, since he could blast people into smithereens with a touch. Gustav had been looking for Amira's mother all night, but had not come into contact with her at all. He was tempted to ask Amira which floor he would be able to find her room, but he knew the last person he wanted to act all suspicious to was Amira. At least he could pretend he bumped into her mother when explaining things that went down Willa's switching identities back. But if he outright asked Amira, things would be suspicious, and since Amira wasn't stupid, she might figure things out. Gustav knew of which floor Amira's mother mostly based in, but since it was midnight, he didn't find her there. He decided to head back to that floor now that morning had arrived. While he was on his own agenda, Amira was enjoying how it felt to be an MBO officer. Number 5 had given Amira the outside watch once more, because she specifically asked for it. Of course, they had no idea she wasn't the real Officer Tantrum, just like Gustav, because Gustav had perfectly helped her mimic Officer Tantrums, look with flesh warping. She kept flying around the Bureau while playing with MBO items that every MBO officer was privy to. Every time there was a communication report, she would report her status with enthusiasm too. Unlike Gustav, she truly wanted to know how it felt to be an MBO officer, while Gustav was faking his to complete his quest. Lucha's city bang. 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 The entire city was currently in a state of panic as explosions rang out all through the city. Chapter 974. Venturing deeper into the ranks of the infected S, a different variant. Red Shadow voiced with a suspicious look. Yes, it's a variant of the infection that had been modified to rapidly increase the process of mutation quickly, rewriting the DNA of an infected and bringing them to this bloodshot stage, Gradier Zanatus explained. Red Shadow evaded another multiple swing of palms in his direction as he leaped upwards while listening. One more thing, Gradier Zanatus voiced out before Red Shadow could give a response about what he had just heard. There was another unknown variant added to this strain of infection. The research team suspects the infected are being controlled by unknown forces due to this strain added. We have to find the people responsible, Gradier Zanatus explained. So we're going to find the rest of the people involved, just like the other one we caught. Red Shadow now understood what their aim was. Precisely. Since the infected had been coming in waves, we can only assume they're still hidden somewhere within Gildian City. How else will they be able to use the new infection to infect new people? Great Ears Anatus voiced from a logical point of view. The problem is, where are they getting this many people to infect? Red Shadow voiced the same question that had been bugging Great Ears Anatus as well. This was a question no one currently knew the answer to, but Great Ears Anatus hoped that with their infiltration into Gildian City, they would be able to uncover all of these mysteries. Great Ears Anatus was good at explaining the situation while they transversed the ranks of these infected, but he wasn't able to notice a cluster of bodies rolling towards him instantly. These infected bodies were all mashed together and clustered to the point they had formed a big ball the size of a 2-story building. They exuded yellowish fumes as they rolled speedily in Great Ears Anatus' position. His reaction speed was fast enough for him to leap over the massive ball. But then the yellowish fumes these clustered, infected bodies exuded had spread across the entire vicinity, so leaping over wouldn't help one necessarily avoid the gas. Great Ears Anatus could already tell how toxic it was, and was about to try an ability, while his body bolted across the air when a cross-shaped red portal opened up in front of him. Zian! He disappeared and appeared thousands of feet behind the large, infected body mass. Red Shadow appeared beside him in the next instant. We have to get rid of some of these infected that might give them lots of troubles at the wall, Great Ears Anatus voiced as he turned around. All of the trees across a radius of 7,000 feet had withered completely from the toxin the clustered of infected bodied exuded while it traveled forward. I agree, Red Shadow voiced as he stared in the direction of another massive-headed infected that had turned its limbs into spider-like legs. It was at least 3 stories tall, and from what Red Shadow was seeing, it would definitely be able to climb up the walls quickly. It looked nimble enough to dodge the attacks coming from up the walls too. It'll go this way, and it'll go this way. Great Ears Anatus and Red Shadow pointed in different directions simultaneously. They didn't need to say any more words to know that they would meet back here after dealing with some of these abominable-looking infected. The Bureau of Cities Research Center. So where is it located? Dash, why are you so interested in this? I am not, Mother. I stumbled across this while checking for a different research to cross-reference my current research. Dasho? I also bumped into Scientist Arjun, who told me all about your obsession with this. Want to tell me what this is all about? A conversation ensued between Amira, Gustav, and her mother as they sat in a private cafeteria area with only 2 other people present. Dash, you see, this is all. Amira's mother began explaining some theories that might have pulled her in and made her interested in investigating this research more. From there, Gustav asked more questions, and since she had no idea it wasn't her daughter, she spilled a lot of confidential information, including the site where they were conducting private continuation of Scientist Zill's research. Time passed by very quickly, and before they knew it, the 23 hours were up. Gustav and Amira met once more in Gustav's bedroom minutes before midnight. Amira was recounting how today events went so Gustav would not have issues resuming from where she stopped, and Gustav also did the same after she was done. You spoke to Mother? Amira voiced out with bothered and surprised tone. Yes, I bumped into her on a particular floor while I was strolling about, Gustav responded. I hope you avoided her. Amira questioned. I couldn't. I had to make small talk, and we didn't discuss much anyways, Gustav replied. Amira looked quite concerned upon hearing this, but Gustav kept assuring her that her mother didn't have any suspicions. After a brief dialogue between them, it was time for them to switch identities back. Flesh warping has been activated. Flesh wriggling sounds rang out as Gustav returned Amira to her previous look after some minutes. He transformed back to Officer Tantrum immediately after and told Amira he had to get back to his duty post. When next are we doing this? Amira inquired with a seemingly interested expression. Soon. "They'll keep in touch," Gustav said with a smile as both of them left the room. The instant they went in separate directions, Gustav's smile faded, returning to his usual expressionless face. "Time to go," he said internally. Gustav headed towards one of the elevator areas and stood within, ready to cause a bit of chaos. The system asked internally. "Definitely." A smirk appeared on Gustav's face as the teleportation elevator took him to a particular floor. In that split second where Gustav was being teleported and could not be seen by any CCTV or anyone, he placed another invisibility token on his forehead. Twilight. He had faded into thin air the moment he arrived on the floor he headed for. Chapter 975. Leaving the Bureau, cognitive concealment has been activated. Gustav's presense faded as well as he headed towards the end of the corridor on this floor and exited the floor to a balcony area. Foyer. Gustav leapt off while activating hover. He flew off the building and headed towards the area of the dimensional and anti-dimensional barrier. He paused in midair just right before he could make contact with the barrier. "It's time," Gustav said internally as he triggered something in his mind while also activating another ability. Boom! 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 Multiple explosions rang out within the Bureau from within, causing it to quake from the force as alarms began to blare crazily. Everyone in the building, ranging from the scientists to the MBO officers, were instantly on the alert as shocked looks appeared on their faces. The MBO officers began to move speedily towards the areas where the explosions were set off meanwhile. Gustav had arched his arm back with intensity with his palm straightened as a milky glow coated his entire palm. Twilight. He pushed it forward with intensity, ripping right through the barrier instantly and proceeded to make a long enough cut for his body to fit through. At the same time, his left hand that had already elongated and struck to the other side of the building, which was at least 1,500 feet away, cut through the barrier there as well. After it performed the same action, it began to decrease in length, receding speedily as Gustav also bolted through the hole in the barrier. Puchuam. His body dived into the ocean that surprisingly didn't pour through the hole in the barrier he had created. The alarms blaring off within the control room as well were so many and included the areas that had been breached in the barrier. South and northern areas of the barriers have been breached around floors 257. One of them reported, while some other MBO officers within were also giving reports of the places where the explosions had gone off within the Bureau. Send officers to check the breach in those areas right away. The commanding officer, who happened to be the lady who brought them here the other day, kept giving out instructions repeatedly. "Do we have eyes on any culprit? Give me a status," she voiced out as she urgently moved about the place. At the same time this was happening, officers were already swimming through the holes Gustav had created within the barrier and gave chase. They didn't know what they were chasing, but they kept it up with the belief they would spot the person responsible for this if they moved further. Some stayed back and flew around the building, trying to find out if the person responsible was still within the premises. Meanwhile, Gustav was already long gone and had activated the dimensional bracelet as he swam towards the surface of the ocean speedily. Boom! He blasted out from the surface of the ocean at the same time the dimensional bracelet countdown of 3 reached 0. Zing! He disappeared in the next instant and reappeared within his room in the MBO. "Mission successful," Gustav voiced out with a smile as he doused the entire floor with water from the ocean. Even though the system had told him the mission was successful, he only considered it successful now since he managed to get back safely without anyone figuring anything out. Spatial Construct Bloodline has been activated. Gustav's fingertips gleamed with violet-colored glows as he drew a circle in the air. Zhihian. The circle expanded and becoming a portal to another dimension. Gustav walked into it in the next instant, and a young man in underwear could be seen laying on the floor in this other dimension that was constructed to look like a small room. Gustav moved towards him and squatted in front of him. The eyelashes of this person on the floor kept fluttering, which proved he was about to wake up. This person was no other than the real Officer Tantrum. Gustav took off the officer wares he was putting on and placed it by the side before bringing out a black pill from his storage device. He downed the pill instantly and gave the system said instructions. Mental manipulation bloodline has been activated. Gustav proceeded to place his hand on the real Officer Tantrum's head. Now I shall impart you these memories from the last 5 days, Gustav said internally as he began to copy scenes from his mind into that of Officer Tantrum. Officer Tantrum's eyelashes kept flickering, and he would have awoken by now, but with the mental manipulation bloodline boosted, Gustav was able to keep him unconscious while imparting these memories. In about 30 seconds he was done, and then he proceeded to wear the MBO outfit on Officer Tantrum before picking him up. Gustav brought Officer Tantrum unconscious body out of the spatial confinement and proceeded to activate his dimensional bracelet. Zing! In a few seconds he got teleported back into the bureau, appearing right inside Officer Tantrum's room. He wasted no time in dropping him on the bed before activating the dimensional bracelet once more. It's been about 3 minutes. It should still be open, Gustav said internally as the dimensional bracelet counted down. Gustav made use of God eyes and looked across the vicinity. He could see that the entire bureau was still in a state of chaos as they pursued the unknown culprit or culprits urgently. They had no idea Gustav had returned and was about to leave again. Zing! A bright blue flash of light surrounded him and disappeared in the next instant like he was never there. A few seconds after Gustav had disappeared, Officer Tantrum opened his eyes with a sleepy expression. Why am I asleep instead of being in my duty post? He questioned with a low tone as he jumped to his feet. Gustav had reappeared within his room in the MBO tower and heaved a sigh of relief that his call of judgment was correct. Chapter 976. Finding out about the situation of Lechen City, Gustav had reappeared within his room in the MBO tower and heaved a sigh of relief that his call of judgment was correct. Everything had gone according to plan, even though he had to improvise and make a few changes to the plan during his mission. Initially, Gustav decided he would just take another scientist's identity after abducting them if he wasn't able to access the floor he needed to with Tantrum's identity. Luckily, catching the attention of Amira and engaging in that dialogue with her during lunch greatly helped in his plans. Now Tantrum would return to duty, thinking all those memories were his, whereas they weren't. The part where they had to exchange identities would never happen again because Gustav had told Amira initially that it was done with the help of a drug that was extremely difficult to acquire. Tantrum could just tell her next time that he wasn't able to get any. The night went by quickly, and the MBO officers in the bureau were still unable to explain what had happened during midnight. The culprits were unknown, and every officer was accounted for. Tantrum was the only one who wasn't at his duty post during the explosion, but no suspicions were brought up from his side because Amira had claimed they were together at the time. Tantrum's memories ended at the part where he and Amira split ways in the room, and some memories that would have led back to Gustav being in control were also missing, so Tantrum couldn't explain why he was back in the room when he and Amira already parted ways. That gap in memory felt a bit suspicious to him, but he couldn't inform anyone about this since he didn't want the others to start suspecting him of anything. The investigations continued regardless, and the whole bureau was on the alert as they checked every nook and cranny of the structure. Cross-checking footage for anything they might have missed was something they did again. However, Gustav had gotten them on this one and left no clues for them to link anything back to him. He knew he would be able to use the dimensional bracelet within the bureau after coming back, due to the hole he left within the dimensional and anti-dimensional barrier. Gustav sat on his bed as he recalled the rewards he got from completing the 1-year quest. 5. Temporary Bloodline Enhancement Card. Does it function like the Bloodline Enhancement pills I used earlier? Gustav asked internally. Even better, the system responded. That's good since it might allow me to use more abilities from the mental manipulation bloodline or any other one I might decide to use it on, Gustav said with a low tone. But I can't keep using these bloodline enhancement pills or what other means to enhance my damaged mental manipulation bloodline. I want to fix it, Gustav muttered. You can do that, but are you sure you have the time to do that right now? The system asked. Well, I completed the quest. I need to further the research and find out more about the warp demolator and if it poses a threat to the Earth in the future, as well as how to stop or prevent it. I need to visit and collect data from the secret research center Amirez, Mother mentioned. Maybe after all these, I might have time to register for ISOP. Gustav realized just how many tasks he had at hand just mentioning these few. Besides that, there's still something else, the system voiced with a slightly ominous tone. Huh, Gustav exclaimed. Check the news, the system replied. Gustav squinted his eyes a little after hearing that and proceeded to bring out his device before checking new platforms online. Minutes later, there were different holographic screens displaying different media outlets with a similar story. Dash. Hordes of infected have been trying to infiltrate Lechin City for the past 2 days. Dash. The MBO are currently trying to contain the situation with the increasing number of infected showing up in Lechin's city borders. Dash. Rumors have spread of the world government threatening to give the order for the city and its surroundings to be blasted off the map. Dash. Evacuation and testing have been ongoing for over 48 hours, and the city still hasn't been evacuated completely due to testing. Dash. Rumors have it that this infection is man-made and rewrites the DNA of every living thing. Gustav had a look of disappointment as he watched the new outlets showcase similar news. The infection that the world government had been trying to keep under wraps had now been exposed to everyone due to this new incident. The evacuation was extremely difficult because other cities were closing their borders to prevent entry. They were afraid of the infected infiltrating their city and infecting others. How is it that the world is always placed in jeopardy whenever I am away? Gustav said as he recalled the issue with young Joe as well. Although this case was a lot lesser in terms of danger, it still had the potential to cause bigger issues if it wasn't dealt with immediately. Also, everyone had their abilities, so Jack could have taken care of this, but he was currently out of Earth taking care of the issue with the Mendalogas. Due to what had happened the last time with young Joe, Earth had gotten into a serious crisis with the Mendalogas. There was currently a battle going on their planet, with Earth slowly taking over their planet and Jack destroying their most powerful beings one after the other. Gustav was not strong enough to engage in such a battle, yet except he would be amongst the fodders that stood in the front line, so they had left him out of it. Either way, he was currently off the Earth with some of Earth's strongest as well. Gustav could see that according to the news and footage from Lechin City, Great-Ears Anatus was dealing with the situation as the commanding over in charge. Gustav was instantly able to tell that this was the case related to what Red Shadow had been complaining about. Chapter 977. Creating a cure, the situation had not completely gone out of control, but Gustav felt it wouldn't have gotten to this point if they had just listened to Red Shadow and investigated earlier on. After gathering some more information, Gustav stood to his feet and moved toward a part of his room. Spatial Construct Bloodline has been activated. His fingers glowed up again as he drew a portal in midair, and it grew to become large enough for him to move in. Gustav went into this portal and arrived in a place similar to where he kept Tantrum hidden earlier. There were all sorts of pieces of laboratory equipment arranged within this place. It looked like an isolated laboratory with chemicals and bots all over the place. Gustav moved towards a massive test tube placed on the south side of the room and grabbed it before moving it to a place. This test tube was as large as 3 adults placed upon each other's shoulders. Gustav poured it into a flaming area with a weird-looking container on it. A loud, sizzling sound rang out next, and he set a timer. A few hours later, Gustav moved toward the container area and put out the flames. After putting them out, he switched on a tap by the side, and some content flowed out of the massive container into a small, transparent flask in his grasp. Gustav moved this flask towards a laboratory table by the side and proceeded to place it on the table. Zing! A small container appeared in Gustav's grasp from his storage device, which was the size of an adult toe thumb. Gustav opened it and poured the contents into the flask. The flash, which initially had an orange color, made a sizzling sound as the ash-colored, thick liquid dropped into it. It looked like it was going to change color, but in a bit, the orange began to consume the ash liquid. After a few more seconds, it looked like the ash murky liquid was not even added to it in the first place. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav activated God Eyes and stared at the content after minutes of the mixture. His eyes zoomed in on a microscopic level, seeing everything within from atom to atom. After inspecting this for some time, Gustav nodded his head with a slight look of gratification. "It worked," he muttered. "Of course it did. If it didn't, that would mean you're dumb, and I don't appreciate having a dumb host," the system replied. "But you say I'm dumb all the time." Gustav raised his left eyebrow as he stated, "Because your intelligence isn't as great as mine." "So you're still dumb compared to me," the system added. "Gustav, I really don't have your time right now, wench. This will work for normal infected, but I guess we're dealing with a variant that is a little different from the normal one," Gustav voiced out as he began to package the contents in the flask. "You can leave it to the scientists. This will help them create a cure faster for the current predicament. Who knows how long it will take without your help?" The system responded. "Yeah, so long as they're able to figure it out using this, they might be able to find a way to cure Miss Amy too, and she can finally come back to Earth." Gustav thought about how this new invention of his could kill two birds with one stone. Gustav had finally managed to find a cure to the ashy infection by using an uncontaminated sample of his blood. However, even though he managed to come up with a cure, the infection had been messed with several times, so it was certain that this wasn't the usual ashy infection and was probably a tweaked variation. Since this was the case, the cure would not work on them completely, but from this, the embryo scientists could create a different cure that could work on these infected. It would shorten the time frame they would spend in creating one, and might even prevent Luchin City from being run over by infected. If that city was infiltrated, the number of infected would increase by a whole lot, which would potentially spell danger for the entire world. Gustav took the sample of this cure that could only completely cure the normal infected and moved out of his room. Gustav had gone AWOL in the last 5 days, so he had no idea that the higher-ups had been looking for him so they could send him on a mission. The instant he arrived at one of the mission halls within the tower, all eyes were locked on him. Gustav noticed the eyes of the officers on him and wondered what was happening. "Officer Crimson, where have you been?" One of them asked with a slightly worried look. "Was a little busy, what's going on?" Gustav asked. "Grand General Sauerkraut had asked everyone to report to him the moment they saw you," the officer behind the counter voiced out. "Why?" Gustav asked. "I believe the higher-ups have an important mission for you," she replied. It turned out that while Gustav had been gone in these 5 days, they had tried reaching across to him to no avail. No one saw him leave the MBO tower, but since they were unable to find him in his room, they figure he could have left without anyone noticing. Now that they were seeing Gustav in the tower again, they realized he might never have left. Anyways, Gustav wasn't about to start explaining things to them. He had something else in mind. The mission can wait. "Give me stats on Luchin City," Gustav requested. The officer nodded and began browsing through a folder on a holographic computer in front of her. "Officer Crimson." A loud voice suddenly rang out from behind. Gustav turned around and spotted the man in a high-ranking uniform headed toward him. "Grand General Sauerkraut," Gustav muttered with a low tone. "Check out my WSA entry. Cultivation through gaming." Chapter 978. Power of the Major Rank S. Gustav turned around and spotted the man in a high-ranking uniform headed toward him. "Grand General Sauerkraut," Gustav muttered with a low tone. The others parted ways for Grand General Sauerkraut as he made his way towards Gustav. "Where have you been?" he questioned. "Busy," Gustav responded with a cryptic tone. "The higher-ups have a mission for you," General Sauerkraut revealed without questioning further about what Gustav had been up to. Does it have to do with the current situation of Lechin City? Gustav inquired. No, it's on. Before Grand General Sauerkraut could complete his sentence, Gustav cut him off. Send someone else, Gustav stated before turning around to face the officer behind the counter. Everyone's eyes slightly widened in astonishment, but upon recalling that this was Gustav, they weren't so surprised. No normal officer would tell off a general, talk more of a grand general. Gustav had already begun receiving information on the current state of Lechin City as he ignored Grand General Sauerkraut behind. It's an important mission with high priority, Grand General Sauerkraut voiced from behind. So is this, Gustav responded from in front. Or do you wish for the city to be lost forever? Gustav questioned. The officers, they're handling it. Everything will be taken care of in due time, Grand General Sauerkraut said. It won't. It might be too late if I don't head there as soon as possible, so whatever mission you wanted to send me on, pick someone else, Gustav voiced out before turning around to leave. Grand General Sauerkraut had a slightly suspicious look as he stared at Gustav walking away. Gustav was now at the major rank in the MBO, so he pretty much could send himself on a mission now if he wanted to. However, in cases where higher-ups still wanted to send him on a particular mission, he would still have to comply, but Gustav didn't care about that. He had decided to completely ignore whatever mission the MBO initially wanted to send him on and deal with the current Lechin City predicament instead. Grand General Sauerkraut couldn't really do anything in this aspect. Gustav's was the rebellious type like his teacher, and not one that could be controlled easily like Jack. Jack still had respect for the higher-ups and would not outrightly refuse a mission unless he had a very standard reason for it, of which he would explain properly. However, Gustav didn't really care about that, and General Sauerkraut could tell it wouldn't be wise to force Gustav to embark on a mission he didn't want. Back then, when the higher-ups did the same to Miss Amy, she ended up failing the missions. It wasn't that she couldn't successfully complete them, but she didn't want to, and she didn't care that it would affect her rank. The MBO would take most of the blame anyways, and it would be a bad dent in their powerful image. Grand General Sauerkraut didn't doubt that someone like Gustav, who had the same person as his teacher, would be any different. Who knows if he might even sabotage the mission and make things worse. Grand General Sauerkraut sighed before walking away to replan the whole mission with a whole different squad. What about those other skilled cadets? I should give them this opportunity, he thought as he walked away. Gustav arrived on one of the floors in the MBO where all sorts of aircraft were parked. This wasn't one of the spacecraft floors, so it wasn't in space, but it looked just as large. Gustav approached one of the pilots here and voiced out, "To Lechin City, Officer Crimson, am afraid I would need clearance first," the pilot voiced out. "I am clearing you with my authority as a major," Gustav voiced out as he brought out his badge. The pilot's eyes widened slightly as he placed his hand on his chest and saluted with a look of respect. "Yes, sir," he voiced out before moving towards one of the aircraft. Only a few people knew that Gustav had been promoted to the major rank. It wasn't done in public. The MBO higher-ups had called him to decorate him with a new rank in private. If he was still at the captain rank, he wouldn't have been able to do this. Gustav followed after him and boarded the aircraft. In a few seconds, they got access to leave the building and flew out through the spatial opening at the edge. Within an area with a ground full of reddish-looking cubes and armor, like vest could be seen floating in the middle as it sent out occasional weird discharge of energy. The skies had a massive bodies of water flowing to and fro like waves with weird-looking creatures could swimming in it. The entire environment was extremely strange, and greenish winds could be seen blowing about from time to time. It was obvious that this wasn't Earth, but it was unknown where this strange place was located. Endrick could be seen moving slowly, taking one step after the other on this ground of reddish cubes that covered a radius of several thousand meters. His aim was obviously the floating vest in the middle of this area, but it was proving extremely difficult to get there. The energy being discharged from the vest made it difficult to take steps forward the closer one got. It was already difficult to transverse the normal cube's ground since one's legs would be sinking into them with every step taken, but now it was worse due to the energy this vest discharged. Currently, Endrick had managed to close in the distance between him and the vest in the last 5 days where he arrived within the area of red cubes. The creatures swimming in the body of water above had tried to eat him multiple times as he moved forward, but he had managed to protect himself despite getting slower with every advancement. Right now, he was only about 100 feet away from the vest, and his entire body was soaked in blood from the sole of his feet to his head. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 979. Acquiring the vest, Endrick breathed in and out profusely as he paused for a bit. According to my calculations, moving another step forward should cause another of these creatures to swoop down from above and try to eat me, Endrick analyzed internally. They get larger with every advancement. I might not be able to overcome this one with the amount of energy I would have to spend to move forward and block it at the same time. At this point, Endrick had decided moving forward would be more detrimental than rewarding, so he paused at his current position. His eyes lit up with a silver and bluish glow as he stretched his hand forward. Zoe! Zoe! Zwiwe! Invisible figures with the exact body structure with that of Endrick phased out of his body and speedily began charging forward. There were about 7 of them, and they were all unaffected by the weird energy the vest was discharging. However, it looked like they couldn't escape the senses of the creatures swimming in the body of water in the skies. Fwai! 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 Multiple skyscraper-sized creatures dived down from above with wide open mouths full of sharp teeth each the size of a truck. They were all aiming for the 7 invisible space clones Endrick had just sent forth. Since these clones were not affected by the discharge of energy, they were still able to move fast, and about 3 of them outran some of the creatures. The other got devoured in an instant before the creatures moved back upwards. The others that were still dashing forward were being chased by other creatures, but the distance between them and the vest was only about 100 feet, so they managed to make it. The instant the first one to arrive before the vest jumped to grab it, the vest discharged a greenish energy that blasted across the vicinity. Bang! The first clone got hit and disappeared instantly, while one of the other 2 hid behind the other one, who ended up taking the rest of the blast damage. Endrick had already stretched his hand in front of him, so the moment the outburst of energy reached his side, it got blocked by his telekinetic barrier. Now only one was left out of all the clones, and this particular one was commanded to grab the vest at this moment. At the same instant, the clone leapt to grab the vest floating in midair. Another gigantic creature was descending with immense speed. Now it was a battle of who would get to the vest first. Fortunately, the space clone hand made contact with the small energy barrier surrounding the vest before the creature got to it. Endrick sent some energy forth, causing the clone palm to phase through the barrier surrounding the vest upon contact. Just as it made contact with the vest, the creature arrived downwards and swallowed the entire vicinity up. Originally, the vest would be unaffected by this and would still remain in the same spot despite the creature haven swallowed the entire vicinity up, but this time when it began to ascend, the vest was nowhere to be found along with Endrick's clone. Gildian City, within an enshrouded layer of purplish fog, 2 figures could be seen standing in a particular area. This area had lots of holes on the ground, all shaped in a rectangular format. This area was covering to less than 1,000 feet of space, and all these holes looked freshly dug out with more than 10,000 of them here. This explained things, Red Shadow voiced out as he stared at the holes. They have been infecting corpses, Great Ears Anatus said with a look of understanding. The high numbers they had been facing all these time were all dead, infected, that had somehow risen from the grave due to the ashy infection. One would have been able to tell that these were initially corpses, but in this age, corpses could be well preserved to the point they wouldn't even look dead. They would just look like they were asleep. If these infected had looked rotten with very bad flesh and hollow eyes, one would have known they were initially corpses, but that was not the case since corpses were now well preserved. The only similarity between infected and corpses was their ashy-looking skin, but one could not attribute that to corpses, since even living people that had been infected would look that way. The numbers of people who died in Gildean City on that fateful day were numbers in tens of millions, Grady Xanatus said with a contemplative look. And so far we've only dealt with around 100,000 of them. The number of people living in Lechin City is not even up to half of the people that have died in Gildean City. Red Shadow voiced out, as well as both of them stared at each other. They're looking to revive all the dead with the ashy infection. The numbers will be more than enough to overrun Lechin City and overpower the officers on the wall, Grady Xanatus said with a low tone. That's if they have not already revived them. Red Shadow voiced out. They keep sending thousands in batches like they want to keep us preoccupied with those ones. They haven't revived them all, yet we have to head to every single cemetery within Gildean City and find the culprits before they achieve their goals, Grady Xanatus stated. The GPS and communication devices don't work this deep in the city. How do we find the location of the cemeteries? Red Shadow asked. Grady Xanatus didn't answer. Instead, he moved towards a particular footstep on the ground. You also have a traceback ability, right? He inquired. We're arriving at Luch's City, sir. Gustav heard the pilot voice out from the control area of the aircraft. Good. Are we clear for landing yet? Gustav asked. Yes, they must believe we're coming with reinforcements, the pilot answered with a slightly disturbed tone as the aircraft began to lower. Well, I am the reinforcement. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 980. Handing the cure over S. Yes, they must believe we're coming with reinforcements, the pilot answered with a slightly disturbed tone as the aircraft began to lower. Well, I am the reinforcement, Gustav said internally as he stared at the holographic display of the city view from above. Most of the streets were empty, but there was a certain part in the city that was swarming with people trying to evacuate. The aircraft landed in a particular part of the city where the MBO officers were being deployed. Upon getting off, the officers around noticed that only Gustav was getting off the aircraft. It's just a single person. One of them voiced with a tone of confusion. Dash, we requested for more reinforcements. How could only one person be sent? Another one voiced out from the side. Who was even the person that? While another one was voicing out, they spotted Gustav's face properly. Officer Crimson? They all voiced with surprised tones as they spotted him. Gustav didn't even act like he heard all of their complaints earlier and just walked towards the entrance of the building the officers had been getting deployed from. Did the higher-ups send him here? This was the thought on their minds as they followed after Gustav. The scientists on this case, were they? Gustav asked. One of them responded and led the way. Minutes later, Gustav was standing in a small laboratory room that looked like it was created in limited timing. So you're saying this is a cure for the normal ashy infection? A middle-aged looking woman with white, scaly face held onto the sample Gustav handed to her with a look of disbelief. Yeah, it's left to you guys to use this and create a new cure that would work against these new psycho-infected, Gustav responded. How do we know it's authentic? We have to test it out first, she voiced with a doubtful tone. You can do that if there is a normal infected around here, Gustav stated. There is none. We'll have to bring this back to the underwater research facility and test it properly to be sure it can be cleared for human use first, she said while placing the sample on the laboratory table. Sure, if you have enough time for that. From what I've heard, the number of infected keeps increasing by the minute, and who knows when the entire city would be overrun, Gustav said while turning around to leave. You can foolishly decide to take so much time to clarify its authenticity, or you can trust someone who has saved the world before and start working on another cure as soon as you can. Gustav began walking away at this point. The eyebrows of the scientist in charge furrowed after she heard this. A look of hesitance could be seen on her face. The choice is yours, Gustav's voice trailed off as he got out. The lead scientist stood in place for a few minutes, unsure of what to do, while the other scientists around stared at her waiting for her decision. We will begin working on making a cure that will affect the bloodshot infected right away, she voiced out as her face lit up with a look of decisiveness. Gustav arrived outside the building, and towards the left he could see a massive gate where lots of citizens were standing in front of. This was several hundred feet towards the left, and these citizens were looking to leave the city, but things were quite difficult. Even those who had been allowed beyond the gated were still there waiting. Evacuation was an almost impossible task due to the sensitivity of the situation. Other cities were not willing to open their borders to people from the city due to the infection scare. So far, everyone knew the ashy infection could be passed from just contact alone. Gustav could count no less than 100,000 people waiting around to get evacuated, and so far not even a single aircraft had left here unless it was from the MBO. Aircrafts had mostly been coming in, carrying troops with them and medical supplies. There was also a massive citadel where people had also gathered, in which was said to be impenetrable for those who were unsure of if the MBO could protect the borders from being infiltrated by the infected. This citadel was created especially for emergency situations and would sink underground if the situation got out of hand to protect people better. However, the citadel was completely filled and mostly important people were allowed in. Those who were unable to get in before it filled up were trying their best to get evacuated, which was also an impossible task currently. That wall is strong. Gustav's eyes were currently gleaming with a red and golden color as he stared at the walls surrounding the city. He already knew it was created by a mixed blood, but then he noticed the sturdiness was very close to that of the Iro silk. However, it was better structured since it was hard to use the Iro silk to form a straight wall. It would always be spiky, and people would not be able to stand on it like this. The city also had a barrier surrounding it within the walls, so the security protocols put in place was really top-notch. Officers standing on the walls could not even get back into the city unless they broke through the barrier or asked for permission for a part of the veil to be lifted. Officer Crimson, are you joining them at the top of the wall? An officer suddenly voiced out from the side. I just might, Gustav responded. Please, we need your assistance. The officers could use as much help as they can get, the officer voiced out. Sure, not a problem. Gustav nodded slightly as he stated. Before I do that, has anyone seen Gradier Zanatus? Gustav asked. Major Gradier Zanatus has left the protection of the walls in our hands till he gets back, the officer responded. Gustav's face shone with a bit of confusion as he heard that. Get back from where? Gustav inquired. Chapter 981. Protecting Lechin City, the officer then went on to explain everything that had happened here within the last few days that were explained to him by the officer at the counter within the MBO tower. Gustav already knew about the whole thing being a conspiracy, and how they found one of the people who was most likely responsible, who ended up committing suicide to cover up the deeds. It was also known that there are others involved who are most likely infected people and controlling them as well. What Gustav had no idea about was the situation of Gradier Zanatus and Red Shadow, who had both jumped off the walls and headed towards Gildian City. Gustav was a bit surprised that they would infiltrate the city on legs, which meant they would have to go through thousands of infected. This way was risky, since they could get infected themselves. Oh, so they also wanted to cut down the numbers of the infected in the process. Gustav figured out their motive. While they could not use any transport to get into the city due to its contagious state, they could still get a jet that could travel very high above the decimated city and drop from above. If they had done this, they wouldn't have been able to cut down on the numbers of infected. Which direction did they head in? Gustav asked. The West Well area, the officer replied. Gustav turned to face the west at this point as his eyes zoomed in on the wall that was hundreds of miles away. Lightning Blitz has been activated, Thur says. Gustav streaked across the air like a lightning bolt appeared over 100 miles away from his initial position. He activated the ability 2 more times, and in just 2 seconds, he arrived atop the west side of the wall. The officer who was standing at his initial position had a look of awe after Gustav had disappeared from this place. He had expected they would use a hover car to get there, but he just got a call on the communication channel that someone had just arrived on the west side of the wall. With the vehicle, it would still take them around 5 minutes to get there, but Gustav had gotten there in only 2 seconds. Officer Crimson, the officers who were initially alerted when a light bolt suddenly turned into someone, now became calm when they saw that it was Gustav. The barrier surrounding the city could be left easily, but getting back in was the problem. Now that Gustav was outside the barrier, he could forget about going back in the meantime. On Gustav's sides, multiple officers could be seen standing in place as their eyes were focused on the ground ahead. "They're not attacking at the moment," he muttered underneath his breath. "We just finished dealing with a set an hour ago and even lost some of our men," one of the officers said to Gustav while pointing at some dents on the wall. "Any patterns?" Gustav asked. "Besides the fact that they sometimes come in hordes every 1 to 2 or 3 hours sometimes, I don't see any," the officer responded. "That in itself is a pattern," Gustav muttered. "And they all vary in abilities, with some being sturdier than others." The officer began explaining again. "Tell me something I don't already know," Gustav said internally. They didn't really have any new information for him, since Gustav already knew these things. What he wanted to know now was where all these infected were coming from. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav's eyes zoomed across the forestry region beyond the wall, scaling past hundreds and thousands of destroyed infected corpses scattered across the place. "You guys didn't find a way to disintegrate the corpses?" Gustav voiced out with a tone of urgency. He looked across the place with God Eyes. The amount of ashy corpses he had seen shook him a little. "No, Officer Crimson. The bodies no longer move after receiving a specific amount of damage," the officer beside him voiced out. "You fools!" Gustav stated, causing the officer to be taken aback. "Unless their bodies are completely destroyed, they will always come back. The only reason the corpses might not have regained life at the moment must be because the culprits want you guys to lose your guards. They will most likely control them to regain life based on the time that favors whatever they're plotting." Gustav voiced out lengthily. The others in the vicinity had awestruck expressions as they stared the corpses scattered all over down below. Gustav felt the culprits must be planning to take them by surprise and bring these ones back to life at the same moment they sent another massive horde here. Gustav's eyes suddenly widened in realization as he thought of something. "Corpses," he muttered underneath his breath. "Officer Crimson?" The officers by the side called out his name with a tone of urgency, but Gustav was currently lost in his own state of realization. "They're making use of the corpses in Gildian City. They're infecting corpses!" Gustav's expression was that of realization as he figured this out. "Officer Crimson!" One of the officers called out again, causing Gustav to be pulled out of his reverie. Gustav could feel the trembling of the wall at this point and looked up ahead. God Eyes has been activated. His sight phased past the trees and grasses as he spotted another horde of infected headed towards the wall. This time they seemed to be coming from every direction. GHHRRHH. The corpses that had been taken down initially began to vibrate as well. The ones on the wall who were able to spot this realized that Gustav was accurate with his words earlier. As Gustav retracted his vision, he voiced out, "There's no less than 200,000 of them heading this way." Their eyes all widened in shock as they heard that. 200,000. "Are you sure you're not mistaken?" "We're only around 10,000 on this wall. Voices of panic could be heard all around. Chapter 982. Gustav takes command S. 200,000? Are you sure you're not mistaken? We're only around 10,000 on this wall. Voices of panic could be heard all around. Gustav only voiced it out low, but it had already spread across the wall quickly from the others, who were exclaiming in shock. At the same moment, Gustav leaped into the air with his hands outstretched. A milky-colored glow appeared on his arm as he stretched them out. Thump, thump, thump. Balls of milky-colored light shot out across the place and landed on the ground up ahead. The instant they landed on the ground, they expanded intensely, disintegrating the surroundings and everything they touched. The corpses that were about to rise were disintegrated as these balls of light expanded, and even got rid of the trees and vegetation across a radius of 3,000 feet. The officers who were standing on the wall were hyped up by this sudden attack of Gustav that had just practically incinerated the environment. Focus on destroying them completely and leaving no body parts left. Gustav yelled out as wings sprouted out from his back. The others on the walls let out a battle cry as attacks began to fly forward. Those who had fire-based abilities or practically any bloodlines with abilities similar to disintegration began working on making sure the beaten-down corpses of the infected were gotten rid of. They had began sending attacks out before the infected even arrived hundreds of feet before the wall. Gustav flew forward as a reddish, hilted katana with electrifying arcs swimming around it appeared in his grasp. The infected were still rushing forward with speed, and some were now around 500 feet away from the walls. Gustav raised the katana as he arrived at a particular spot in the air and swung downwards with intensity. Vrhhhhhhh. A massive red arc traveled downwards with intensity and left a gigantic gash in the ground upon making contact. The ground trembled intensely as cracks appeared all over the ground, began sinking in even more. A deep gash, like pit, had been left in the ground from this attack, that covered a distance of more than 4,000 feet. This pit created from Gustav's attack was at least 150 feet deep, and it had surrounded this part of the wall, around 500 feet ahead. The infected who were rushing forward without thinking began to fall into the pit Gustav's attack had created. Aim your attacks towards the pit. Gustav yelled out. The officers on the walls let out a battle cry again in response as they began firing attacks at the pit ahead. Gustav didn't stop there. He flew towards the west side and performed the same action again, leaving very wide gash like pits on the ground several hundred feet before the wall. He yelled for the officers to aim their attacks there as the infected began to fall in. This slowed the infected down by a whole lot as the ones with normal human size fell in. While they kept falling in, numerous attacks ranging from fireballs to bluish energy balls to lightning bolts to dark energy strikes landed in the hole, making all sorts of explosions to ring out. Some of the other infected who had mutated to the point where they were even more massive than a tree were able to scale over. Shwiyai! A massive ash-colored hand suddenly phased past Gustav's left as he moved to the side to dodge in midair. Gustav slashed the katana upwards in response, causing the immensely long arm to get cleaved in two. It let out a toxic ashy-colored gas at the area Gustav cut off, causing him to dive upwards with speed. Numerous more hands were flying upwards from below, causing Gustav to dodge repeatedly as he tried to escape the toxins. Using energy discharge would be good in this situation, but it would affect the wall too. I can only use attacks that don't cover a large radius, Gustav thought internally as he peeked downwards. He spotted the infected, which had no less than 27 arms protruding from his body. He flipped repeatedly in the air as he dodged more of the arms before diving downwards with speed. Gustav swung his katana towards the right as he descended to a point. Twiwiai! Another reddish arch slashed forward, ripping the tree-sized infected in two and even destroying tens of infected behind. Greenish balls of toxin began flying towards Gustav before he could dash upwards again. Gravitational displacement has been activated. Gustav suddenly stretched his left hand towards the side, causing the green balls of toxin to start flying back in the direction it came from. It blasted through multiple infected as it arrived back in the mouth of the infected, who spat it out. Boom! The head of the infected got blasted to pieces. Bang! Gustav landed on the ground and looked forward. The entire vicinity was crowded with infected to the point that he couldn't even see spaces in between them as they hurried forward with bloodshot eyes. Bang! Boom! 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 Explosions rang out across the place as the attacks from the officers atop the walls kept landing and destroying hundreds of infected. However, even with the number of infected they were destroying by the second, it still looked as if the swarm of infected were unaffected. The sheer numbers that were left made it look like their efforts were in vain. Gustav's hand tightened around the katana as blood flowed down his right hand. Might be the best time to make use of that temporary energy doubling card, Gustav said internally. The system wasted no time in using one of the cards Gustav had gotten as a reward according to his will. Times 2 24 hours energy boost card has been activated. Host energy will be 2 times as high for the next 24 hours. I'll have to keep the katana back in my storage device after this attack. Chapter 983. Clearing a horde. Power boost has been activated. -508. Gustav moved the katana to the side as he prepared to swing it. His muscles expanded intensely that it even showed through his uniform. As the infected closed in, Gustav finally swung sideways with intensity. Foyer has. A gigantic reddish arc, carrying tremendous energy, suddenly blasted forth as the ground trembled violently from the sudden outburst. Boom! The ground split open in Gustav's position as the residue energy from the attacks affected the grounds and every area surrounding him, including behind. The reddish arc was so gigantic it had stretched out to cover no less than half of the area surrounding the walls. Even before making contact, some of the infected were already getting ripped to shreds by the intense energy it generated. The officers on the walls watched from above with their jaws loosened as they saw the intense destructiveness the attack was wreaking on the surroundings. In just an instant, over 10,000 infected were cleared before the arc thinned out and disappeared. The entire area had been turned into a pitfall as the ground caved in from the attack, despite Gustav's attack not aimed at it. Currently, Gustav was floating in the air due to the land caving in from his attack. Gustav's arms had exploded, but he managed to keep the katana back in his storage device before they fell into the pit that had been created. He was flying armless as he stared at the destroyed surroundings. Only dark and caved-in ground could be spotted for as far as the eyes could see. He had practically cleared the first horde of infected who were way ahead of the others. How is he so powerful? I'm an Echo ranked, but even I can't do that. I can't even spot any of the infected right now. The officers on the walls behind all had looks of astonishment as they looked downwards. There were only a few kilo-ranked officers on the walls, and they were the ones who were managing to destroy 50 of these normal-looking infected with every attack. However, the more powerful infected were difficult to take down with a single attack, sometimes especially when they were also aiming at the wall with their own attacks. Some MBO officers had already been hit by attacks, which proved just how dangerous those ones were. The southern side of the wall was still being attacked by the infected who had branched to that side, but the ones in the western side had practically been completely cleared for now. Go assist those on the southern side. I'll take care of this place myself, Gustav voiced out as he flew upwards to have a better view of the environment. The MBO officers on this side of the wall, who were no less than 2,500, began to move towards the south side after hearing what Gustav had said. There was no doubt he could hold his own in the meantime, since currently there were no infected in sight. The ones on the south side were having it difficult because the numbers had tilted after some of the infected moved towards that side when they sensed the outburst of energy. On the southern side of the wall, Gustav had also created a pit in front, but it had been filled up already. Some MBO officers who fly could already be seen in the dark sky, raining down attacks on the infected that caused the entire vicinity to quake. Gustav breathed in as he made use of God eyes to peer forward. The rest of the horde behind were already closing in on the wall again. There were no more trees or vegetation in the vicinity, as everything had been destroyed from the initial attack. Lightning Blitz has been activated. Gustav suddenly disappeared as he turned into a streak of lightning and reappeared 100 miles away instantly. The infected who was charging forward had not expected to suddenly see someone appeared before him, but then he noticed Gustav was armless and lunged forward. A pair of arms suddenly pushed out from Gustav's initially empty shoulders as he reached out and grabbed hold of the infected head. "Time to go back to the land of the dead," he muttered as he squeezed. Bang! The head of the infected bursted open like a watermelon that was smashed with a sledgehammer. Gustav had found himself in the midst of the infected again, and all of them were lunging for him. Gravitational displacement has been activated. Energy discharge has been activated. An outburst of reddish energy suddenly blasted out from his being. Boom! Gildian City. How do they keep evading us? Red Shadow asked as he looked around the vicinity, only to see holes all over the place. If we had a way of pinpointing all the locations of cemetery within Gildian City, it would make things a whole lot easier, Gradier Xanatus voiced out as he inspected the place. Now we're only retracing their steps, and it's making us slower in catching them, Red Shadow voiced with a sigh. They had been on this for up to a day now, and they had no idea about the situation of Lechin City, since they couldn't communicate back to them. Due to what they had found out recently, they knew Lechin City was in real trouble. If the culprits were gatekeeping some of the infected, just so they could gather them in large numbers and send them all at the same time, Lechin City would definitely fall due to the high number of corpses. We need to find a way to pinpoint all of the seam. Gradier Xanatus suddenly paused as he sensed something. "Did you hear that too, or it's just me?" he said with a low tone. "I heard it as well." Red Shadow responded with his eyes depicting confusion. "That voice." Gradier Xanatus muttered as he stared at Red Shadow. "It's the kid," both of them stated at the same time. Chapter 984. It's the kid, that voice. Gradier Xanatus muttered as he stared at Red Shadow. "It's the kid," both of them stated at the same time. They both had looks of confusion and disbelief mixed on their faces. They were not hearing the voice from their ears. Instead, they were hearing it within their minds. Gradier Xanatus, Red Shadow, can you hear me? "Gustav, is that you?" Red Shadow asked internally. "Yeah, how are you doing this, kid?" Gradier Xanatus questioned within his mind as well. It turned out a kind of mind link had been created where Red Shadow and Gradier Xanatus could hear each other and converse with Gustav as well. "I'm currently at the borders of Lechin City, battling the hordes of infected. You came here?" Red Shadow responded with a tone of surprise, since he recalled Gustav stating he was busy with something. "Yes, I came to help out. I had to stay because the numbers increased by a whole lot, and it's getting difficult for the officers deployed here." Both of them had looks of urgency as they heard that. It turned out things had gotten worse after they had left, just like they assumed it would. "I figured something out. The infected beings sent here are corpses from the cemeteries in Gildian City," Gustav voiced internally. "We know about that already," Gradier Xanatus said in response. "We're currently trying to retrace their steps so we can find them before they revive every single corpse here," Red Shadow explained. "It's proving difficult because we can't navigate the way to the cemeteries ourselves without a GPS, with the bad visuals and toxic energy in the air." Gradier Xanatus also added, "So you guys just need a way to pinpoint the locations of every cemetery within Gildian City, right?" Gustav asked. "IIT would make things a whole lot easier if there was a way we could do that. Trying to retrace their steps will take more time, and who knows, we might already be too late before we find them." Gradier Xanatus replied. All right, wait to get the signals. What signals? Gradier Xanatus questioned internally, but this time there was no response. Red Shadow noticed they couldn't communicate with one another in their minds anymore, which meant the link had been disconnected. How did the kid even do that? Lechin City is at least 600 miles away from our position, Gradier Xanatus voiced out with a confused expression. Red Shadow couldn't answer this, since he was also unaware of how Gustav pulled such a feat. He asked us to hold on, so I guess he's about to try something again, Red Shadow stated. Both of them knew very well that Gustav never failed to amaze them, so they decided to hold on for a bit to see what he was about to pull off again. Back in Lechin City, Gustav had just landed from the sky again and sent rumbling waves across thousands of feet, destroying the vicinity. Hundreds of infected were ripped apart with body parts flying in every direction as he moved forward. Atomic disintegration has been activated. Purification, Gustav voiced out as he stretched his hand forward, causing milky light to shoot out. Every body part in the vicinity was disintegrated in a couple of seconds, and Gustav peered forward once more while activating God Eyes. They're still more than 10 minutes away. The faster ones will arrive within half the time, Gustav voiced as he retracted his sight. Why? He leaped into the air as wings sprouted out of his back. I need to be quick with this, he voiced as he stared in the direction of Gildian City. Far ahead, he could see the purplish fog that enshrouded the city. You'll need to be very high in order for any computer eyes to work, since it's Gildian City, the system voiced in his mind. How high? Gustav asked. Almost if not space level high. The system replied. Gustav subconsciously sucked in breath as he heard this. He looked upwards and suddenly blasted further into the skies. Boom! A sonic boom was created as he headed upwards speedily. The winds pushed Gustav's hairs to the back as they swimmed from across his sides from the intensity. While Gustav was flying high, he was also moving forward, so he would be directly above Gildian City when he reached his desired height. High enough? Gustav asked internally as he kept flying upwards. Still need about 100 miles or so, the system responded. The instant Gustav heard this response, he activated an ability. Lightning Blitz has been activated. His body turned into a streak of lightning as he ascended further in the sky, cutting across 100 miles in an instant. The instant Gustav reappeared high in the sky, he paused his ascent. Wow! Gustav exclaimed as he felt the laws of gravity began to affect him. He was at a point in the sky where he knew misbalance could cause him to start floating into outer space uncontrollably. The wings on his back were not functioning properly at this height, so he activated hover to balance himself. It was currently nightfall in this part of the world, but Gustav could faintly spot the sunlight on the other side of Earth at this height. He could see the curvature of Earth as well, which was blocking the sunlight at the edge, while the moonlight was still further upwards from his direction. This wasn't the time to admire space, since he was here for an important reason. A device similar to a tab appeared in Gustav's hand, displaying a map and pinpointing several spots. Gustav stared at it as he noted these places that were pointed out. He was currently floating far above Gildian City, staring at the places on the maps that had been pointed out by the device. Initially, Gustav had spoken to Red Shadow and Gradier Xanatus through mental manipulation. He knew they were somewhere within Gildian City, but of course no one would have an idea of where they were precisely within the city. Chapter 985. Helping out from space even if anyone knew of their precise location. Gustav couldn't head to them because he had to join the other officers in protecting the city. He just needed to talk to them so he could pass on the information he knew about the corpses. He had no idea if they were aware or not, but he knew it was worth the try, since this would potentially save them a lot of time if they didn't already know. He had made use of one of the temporary Bloodline enhancement cards he got as a reward from the system for finishing the 1-year quest. After using it on the mental manipulation Bloodline, he was able to spread the range of his mental perception He just needed to keep speaking in the minds of every life he encountered while spreading out his mental perception, and based on the response, he would know if the mind belonged to the people he was looking for. Fortunately, he found them and was able to pass across his message, which all led to this moment. He wanted to help them in pinpointing the locations of the cemeteries within Gildean City. It was impossible to use computerized devices in Gildean City, so he had to come all the way up here just so he could use one to mark out the cemeteries on the map. Gustav proceeded to keep the tab that pinpointed these locations and activated God Eyes. God Eyes has been activated. His sight zoomed down with speed as he locked in on one of the cemeteries. This was the precise location where Gradier Xantus and Red Shadow were situated. A spherical, shaped purplish orb suddenly appeared out of nowhere in front of him. The orb, which was gleaming with bright lights and reddish lightning, like arcs swimming around it, suddenly began to descend from the sky with speed. It dropped at an insanely fast speed, heading in the same direction Gustav had his eyes on. Despite the purplish fog that enshrouded the city, Gustav's sight was still extremely clear from this height while he made use of God Eyes. "It's been almost 2 minutes now. We really don't have time to waste," Red Shadow said with a tone of impatience. "Yeah, but it's Gustav. He's definitely up to something, and I'm sure we'll be seeing in a few," Gradier Xanatus stated in response. Immediately after Gradier Xanatus finished saying that a head-sized glowing orb suddenly fell from the sky. It took them by surprise, but in the next instant it stopped falling before it made contact with the ground. It floated upwards and stopped right in front of Gradier Xanatus. It paused in midair after arriving in front of him. Gradier Xanatus turned to glance at Red Shadow with "I told you. So look, they thought they would be hearing a voice next or something, but instead the orb began moving. Fwai. It turned to head in the southwest direction, causing them to give chase. Gustav, who was far above, was not just leading them to a cemetery, but leading them towards the cemetery where he had spotted some people doing shady deeds. He wanted to be quick with this, so he could get down back to Lechin City before the next wave of infected arrived there. The orb was moving very quickly, and both of them gave chase. They were both very quick, so it wasn't a problem even when the orb was moving at a speed of 2,000 feet per second. About a minute later, they noticed they were closing in on a particular location, and Red Shadow could sense the presence of living creatures. "We're here," Red Shadow voiced out as they closed in on a particular area. "We have to head forward subtly at this point. They must not see us coming," Gradier Xanatus also voiced out as he suddenly paused his movement. Both of them stood behind a particular tree as they stared at an area up ahead which had broken down fences erected around it. The orb had also stopped moving at this point and was about to turn around. "Thanks, kid." Gradier Xanatus was unaware of whether Gustav could hear him or not, but he still voiced out. The orb turned around at this point and began to speed back towards Lechin City borders. Far up in space, Gustav noticed he had finished playing his part and took his eyes off the area he had sent Gradier Xanatus and Red Shadow in. He had left them to take care of the rest since he knew just how capable they were. He had to still worry about the side of the city walls he was protecting. "Damn it, they're close." Gustav suddenly voiced out with a tone of urgency as he spotted the infected heading towards the west side of the wall. At this same moment, Hover has been deactivated. Hover got deactivated after its activation time finished counting down, and now it went into cooldown mode. Gustav began to lose his balance in space due to this, and quickly activated his Flame's Death Ace mixed breed Bloodline, sprouting massive batwing from his back. However, even with this, he was barely able to stabilize himself since being in Earth atmosphere was a lot different than being in space. Gustav knew if he headed down at this point, the infected would get to the wall before he did, so he focused intensely at this point, even with the bad stability. His orb flew speedily in the direction he wanted, and in a matter of seconds it was already tearing through the ranks of infected from behind. Gustav waited for a bit till it arrived at the area he wanted it to before stating in his mind, detonate in the west area of Luchin city walls. There were barely any officers standing in this part since Gustav had sent them to assist the others on the south side. However, a dangerous situation was currently brewing as large numbers of infected were heading this way. Chapter 986 Perfect Timings. However, a dangerous situation was currently brewing as large numbers of infected were heading this way. They had closed in on the walls in the west area, and the number of MBO officers currently manning this part of the wall were very few. They were already making calls on the communication channel about the impending doom. The other side of the wall was also facing difficulty with the numbers of infected attacking, so it had become quite a dangerous situation with barely any officials to spare. Some were already heading towards the west side as quickly as they could as they heard the voices of urgency from the officers there. The officers on the west side were trying their best to keep the infected away from the wall, but the ones that had already closed in on the walls were extremely quick and quite sturdy. Even with the others heading towards the west side of the wall, it was looking like it might be too late as a few of them were only 10 feet away from getting to the wall. All of a sudden, boom! A massive explosion rang out from hundreds of feet beyond, sending destructive shockwaves across the vicinity. The purplish with reddish waves of energy mixed and ripped the creatures in the vicinity to shreds, even reaching the walls. Jeeth charth charh hbb. The walls trembled intensely as the residue energy slammed into it. The officers struggled to keep their balance, and fortunately no one fell over, but they wondered where such destructive attack had come from. Thousands of infected were destroyed in an instant, and those who had closed in on the walls had their body parts sprayed all over the walls. About 3 massive infect had managed to escape the destructiveness of the wave due to their sturdy bodies and began to climb the west wall. The officers there quickly got to work and began sending forth destructive attacks downwards. A whitish shell grew out of one of them, covering his upper body as he climbed up. The attacks kept bouncing off this particular infected as he climbed upwards. The officers gritted their teeth, and one of them leaned over the wall with black cords reaching out of his body. These black cords looked metallic, were each very long in length, and kept stretching out, stabbing into the sides of the wall and lifting him. Multiple of them pushed forward, pinching onto the shell of this infected with the intention of lifting it. Suddenly a part of the shell opened up. An infected climbing up reached out with one of his hands to grab ons of the cords before the officer could react in time. He was pulled forward and found himself heading towards the mouth of this infected, which was wide open. His eyes widened at the sheer strength of this infected, which had taken him by surprise. Chomp! His head was cleanly bitten off in the next instant as the infected flung him towards the ground next. The officers atop the walls had not expected the current situation and began hurling down attacks as much as they could, but at the same time they were holding back, so as not to damage the wall. They were all standing on the wall afterwards. Since they were focusing on this one, 2 other infected were climbing up with ease. New novel chapters are published on Freewebble, CM. The officers who sent attacks towards the others were barely able to hit them due to their speed. The sturdy one suddenly leaped upwards with speed, crossing over 1,000 feet across the wall in an instant. The officers' eyes widened as they spotted the infected above the wall, falling from the air towards their standpoint. At this same instant, a loud, ripping sound reverberated across the air. It sounded like the sky was being ripped open. Thiases! One of the officers who hadn't reacted in time was about to get his neck bitten by the 13 feet tall infected that had suddenly leaped across the wall. However, a streak of lightning suddenly appeared in front of him and transformed into a young man with dirty blonde hair. Get lost! His thunderous voice rang out as his right hand, which was tightened in a fist, shot forward with intensity. Bang! Shockwaves spread across the place as a might punch slammed into the side of this infected face. Twaya! The force of the punch sent him hurling back in the direction he leapt from. At the same instant Gustav did this, he leapt forward while stretching his hands to the side. Atomic disintegration has been activated 2 large, atomic blades appeared in his grasps as he fell across the air. He spotted the other 2 infected climbing upwards and flung the atomic blades in their direction. Fwai! Fwai! The blades accurately tore right through the foreheads of these infected, causing them to lose balance as they fell through the air. Gustav, who was falling across 3,000 feet, stabilized himself and arrived right below the infected he had just punched. Bam! He landed right atop him and made use of gravitational displacement to increase their fall speed and mass. Bang! A cloud of dust blasted across the place as the grounds once more trembled from the impact of Gustav landing right on top of this infected. Another crater had yet again been formed on the ground, and 3 infected could be seen within. The officers atop the walls began sending down attacks, as the other 2, who were speedily climbing over the wall earlier, had finally been stopped. These 2 were not dead yet, despite Gustav's attack, but after the bombardment of the officers atop the wall, they were blasted to smithereens. "Stop attacking! Don't hit Officer Crimson!" One of them yelled out after noticing the area of impact was awfully close to where Gustav had landed. As the dust cleared up, Gustav looked down and saw that he was standing on a shell instead of a body, like he expected. To his surprise, this shell was very sturdy, and even with such intense landing, it didn't have more than a few scratches on it. Chapter 987, Doomed City. The infected, being protected by the shell, suddenly began moving at this point and lifted Gustav off him. "I really don't have time for this. I should destroy you now," Gustav stated as he sent out another fist the instant the shell was lifted. At the same moment, the infected, who was more than 2 times Gustav's height, reached out to block Gustav's fist. Bang! He got sent flying across the air and did a flip once before landing on the ground to balance himself. Tzz. The infected still slid back by a few feet more before finding stability. The creature made a weird, shrieking sound in the next instant as it lowered its hand. This one is definitely stronger than the others. Gustav noticed that his punch was barely effective against it. Besides that, it seemed like this infected had higher intelligence than the others, as it didn't just try to jump in and attack Gustav foolishly. It even knew how to block an attack, something which the others had done. We can assume there won't be more like this in the coming hordes. Things are going to get more difficult, Gustav analyzed. Gustav dashed forward at this point. Swish! Despite how sturdy the creature was, it was still no match for Gustav's speed. Grab! Gustav grabbed it by the neck and leaped into the air. Bang! He slammed the creature into the ground as he descended from the head. However, it had managed to shield itself with this shell again and remain undamaged. Gustav's hand was now stuck underneath this shell that had covered its upper body with the exception of its shoulder. Getting stuck there, the creature made use of this opportunity to attack Gustav by swinging its hands forward. Enough! Gustav's eyes glowed a dark red as claws protruded from his hand stuck underneath the infected shell. 3 howls! His claws ripped right through the head of the creature, dividing it in 2 halves. The creature still had life in it even after this, and still tried to stab its hand through Gustav's belly even after the attack. Bang! It was like its hand hit something 10 times sturdier than steel, as Gustav remained unaffected by the hit. He forcefully pulled his hand from under the shell, ripping a bit of his hand off in the process. His hands healed very fast as he reached out to grab the creature's arms and rip them from their sockets. New novel chapters are published on Freewebble. CM, atomic disintegration has been activated. Purification! Gustav voiced out as a bright, milky light enveloped his entire figure. The others on the west wall saw that Gustav had finally dealt with the infected and heaved a sigh of relief. They hoped there wouldn't be more infected like this that would be difficult to deal with, but they had no idea what reality had in store for them. With the number in hordes increasing by the hour, who knew what they would encounter? "There are more heading this way," one of them yelled out from above the wall. Gustav turned around at this point and leapt upwards. Thump! The earth vibrated as he traveled across 2,000 feet in an instant before landing on the wall. Gustav turned back around to look forward. God Eyes has been activated. We're going to need more reinforcements, Gustav voiced out as he spotted the horde heading in this direction. We've been asking from the tower, but they said this is the number of officers they can deploy at the moment. That we have to make do with these numbers. One of the officers voiced out. With these numbers, the city is pretty much doomed, Gustav voiced out with a light chuckle before his face went back to looking serious. The officers that heard this were overcome with a look of dread. They recalled Gustav had mentioned the number of infected headed towards the wall when they were still miles away. Gustav was accurate about the numbers, which made them realize he must have seen the numbers headed here at the moment and decided the city was doomed. There are only two ways out of this now. Those two find a way to avert this crisis by dealing with it on their own end, or we evacuate the city right now. Either way, with the numbers approaching the city, is pretty much toast, Gustav said internally. I need one of you to head back into the city and convince those in command to find a way to evacuate the city right now. We might be able to hold the number for some time, but they will eventually break through this defense, Gustav said with a tone of urgency. Evacuation right now is... One of the officers was speaking when Gustav cut him off. I know. Just try to make sure it happens. If not, this entire city will turn into an infected territory, Gustav stated. The officer, who looked like young and dark with curly white hair, nodded in response before heading towards the south area of the wall. He flew upwards as he sped up, trying to accomplish the task Gustav gave him quickly. Well, if they chose not to listen, I might as well just destroy the entire city. Won't let the world be jeopardized because of one city, Gustav muttered with an undisturbed look. He didn't really care much about the state of the world, but for the people he cares about, he had to care, which was why he didn't care about destroying everyone here, so long as the people he cared about were unaffected. He was glad Red Shadow and Gradius and Adis were currently not here, so he felt he was in the clear. The officer beside him, who heard him mutter, all had looks of disbelief and internally hoped Gustav was joking about destroying the entire city. Some of them even doubted he had the power to do so, even though this was a small city. Hopefully they wouldn't have to find out whether Gustav was capable of that or not. Are you ready to battle mixed breed and mixed blood infected too? Gustav asked as he deactivated God Eyes. Chapter 988, A Mix of Infecteds. Are you ready to battle mixed breed and mixed blood infected too? Gustav asked as he deactivated God Eyes. What? The officers exclaimed with looks of disbelief as they heard that. Why do you think I said the city is doomed? Gustav voiced out rhetorically. It turned out Gustav had spotted ashy-colored creatures that were not humans within the midst of the infected. So far with the situation of the infected, there had never been a case of infected mixed breed reported. So far it had been humans, Slarkovs, and a few mixed bloods that had been reported infected. Mixed bloods had a bit of resistance within them, which was why they couldn't easily get infected, but humans and Slarkovs, who were more normal, could easily get contaminated with the ashy infection. The few mixed bloods that had been infected were immediately taken care of, killed, because they were more of a threat than human or Slarkov infected. The source of this content is Freewebble. A mixed blood infected would have their bloodline abilities boosted and even evolved at times with the state of their bodies changing. They were way more stronger. The one Gustav had just killed earlier too was a mixed blood infected. Who knew how many mixed bloods died on the day Gildian City was destroyed? The situation was about to get real worse, with even mixed breed infected entering the fray. Gustav didn't really see any way out of this situation without the city getting run over. However, if Red Shadow and Gradius and Adis were able to find the culprits, maybe they would find a way to take care of this situation. Bang, bang, bang. The sounds of collision rang out across the vicinity as a heated battle between 6 people played out. 2 were on the same side while the other 4 were their opponents. They each took care of 2 opponents, and it looked like even when they were outnumbered, they were still winning. Hiawa! One of the opponents who had magnetic-like armor on his body yelled out as he formed a massive fist with it and sent it hurling down at the masked man who was facing one of his comrades. Red Shadow spotted this attack and quickly grabbed hold of his opponent as reddish footprints appeared all over the place. One of the footprints that was behind a large boulder blinked twice, and he suddenly appeared in that spot with the person in his grasp. Bang! He slammed the opponent face into the boulder the moment he appeared there, while the massive metallic fist, hurling down earlier, slammed onto their initial position. The armor, like blue helmet covering his opponent's face, broke apart, revealing part of his face after he got smashed into the boulder. Red Shadow spotted the feminine face bleeding within the space in the helmet as he figured out he had been fighting with a woman all this time. "Don't treat me as a woman. Fight me fairly without holding back," she voiced out as she noticed the look of realization in Red Shadow's eyes despite his masked face. Bang! Follow current novels on Freebnovel. CM. Red Shadow's fist suddenly slammed into her gut, sending her hurling across the air. Bam! 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 She slammed through several trees due to the impact from his punch. "Never said I'd hold back," Red Shadow muttered underneath his breath. Immediately after saying that, he made a side dash, dodging another fierce attack. Boom! A bluish streak of energy charged past his side as the other opponent covered in black metallic armor charger crazily towards him. On the other side, Gradier Xanatus kept dashing from side to side as he dodged the attacks of the two he was fighting against. Every single opponent here had an armor-like helmet covering their faces, and they were also clad in technology suits with different purposes. Gradier Xanatus had never seen such high-class suits that could contend against the power mixed bloods, except in the MBO. And even within the MBO, one would need to be a mixed blood before they could use such suits, but he surprisingly couldn't sense any bloodline energy coming from this bunch. He could have ended this sooner, but he kept dragging out the fight to be sure he wasn't mistaken. With these technology suits, they would be able to challenge Echo-ranked mixed bloods, and there was a high possibility of them winning. Hiya! One of them yelled out again as multiple laser blades flew out from his technological suits. Gradier Xanatus leaped upwards, and these blades followed him like they had locked onto him. At the same moment, one of them appeared right behind him like he teleported and joined both hands before sending a conjoined fist hurling down at Gradier Xanatus in the air. Gradier Xanatus moved to the side even in midair and reached out to grab something. A staff appeared in his hand and began gleaming with a dark purplish light. Gradier Xanatus waved this in the air, clearing the laser blades flying at him in an instant. As he fell from the air, he raised his staff with intensity and slammed it downwards the moment he made contact with the ground. Boom! A massive shockwave spread out, slamming heavily into the one on ground. He got tossed across the air as even the trees in the vicinity cleared from the destructiveness. Bang! He got knocked out the instant he slammed into a rock 100 feet behind. The one in the air had a look of anger as he charged downwards to engage Gradier Xanatus. In a part of Lechin City within a large building, a brown-skinned young MBO officer with white curly hair could be seen engaging in a serious banter with some men clad in MBO uniforms. With the way their uniforms looked, it was obvious that they were high-ranking officers. "We cannot do that, boy," one of them voiced out. "This city will be overrun by the infected soon," the curly white-haired officer stated with a tone of frustration. "Says who?" "The officers on the wall are more than capable of preventing that." The officer on the left with only few strands of hair on his head voiced out in response. Chapter 989, Officer Fola's Sentimentality. Officer Crimson asked me to pass this message across. He says there is no preventing what is coming. If you want the people to survive, you have to evacuate everyone, the curly white-haired officer said once more. "Officer Fola! Well, I understand that this is a message from Officer Crimson. You must understand that evacuation right now is simply just impossible, the other officer with the glowing green-colored hair said with a regretful tone. You guys don't understand. The lives of everyone is at stake here. This has to be done, or... While Officer Fola was speaking again, the officer interrupted. No, I do understand, but the other cities will not open their borders to anyone from this city, and the government is trying to prevent any possible spread, so they're allowing it to happen. Evacuation is truly an impossible situation, even though this is a request from our Savior, the officer with the glowing green hair stated. Officer Fola had a look of defeat on his face as he heard this. He turned to the side to look out the window, and down below he could spot thousands of Lechin City citizens standing outside a gate with downcast looks. They're all gonna die and get turned into infected. I don't think you two understand the severity of the situation. Fola started speaking once more with a decisive look. He wasn't ready to give up yet in trying to convince these old farts to get the people out of here. If the entire city becomes a city of the infected, it's going to be worse for the world, and the culprits who had orchestrated this whole thing would have one, because they will have more infected to control, which means they could head to other cities with a larger army, he voiced out. The two had contemplative looks as they heard this, which made Officer Fola's face lit up with a hopeful expression. The source of this content is Freewebble. Calm. I'm afraid it's still not possible. His hopes were doused with a bucket of cold water as he heard this response from one of the two high-ranking officials. If this city ever gets taken over, the higher-ups will give the command for it to be blasted off the map, which means everything will be destroyed, including the infected, the officer explained while placing his hand on Officer Fola's shoulder. The only way to save the city is by preventing the infected from breaking through, he added. This closing remark made Fola feel as though this was an impossible situation. With the way things were, the city getting taken over by infected was inevitable, and evacuation was impossible. It really looked like an hopeless situation. He turned to stare at the people waiting outside once more. Is this how lives are going to be lost under my watch this night? He gritted his teeth as he tightened his fist with a feeling of powerlessness rising from deep within. He left the building a while later to return towards the wall. As he passed the front gate, the people all stared at him with respectful but tired gazes. He tried not to look at anyone as he moved forward. He noticed someone tugging at the sleeve of his uniform and turned to the side. Officer, my mom says we're all gonna die. Is it true? A beautiful blue-eyed girl who looked no older than 6 years old voiced out with an innocent tone. Officer Fola felt his heart tighten as he stared down at this girl. A flashback played in his mind as he squatted in front of her. Follow current novels on Freebnevel. CM, no, nobody is dying, he forced a smile as he responded. The MBO is going to protect everyone, he added, causing the girl's face to lit up with a smile. Mother. The girl voiced out as she turned around with a joyful look and began running towards a young lady behind. I told you the MBO would protect us, they're heroes, she voiced out as she ran into the embrace of the young woman, who looked quite tired. Officer Fola turned around at this point and tightened his fist. I will protect this city, even if it's the last thing I do, he decided internally. At this same moment, loud blasts began to ring out in the direction of the west. It was fleeting since the distance from here to where it was going down was far, but it was obvious that some crazy battle was going down. It has begun, Officer Fola muttered as he leaped into the air. A bluish aura, like glow, surrounded him as he blasted across the air with immense speed in the direction of the west. The west wall boom. Boom! Boom! Sounds of explosion rang out as multiple officers could be seen below on the ground fighting against the infected that had gotten close. The ones on the walls were hurling down attacks at the other infected behind, causing the entire vicinity to tremble with different types of powerful attacks. Some officers who were flying were handling some infected who also had flight abilities, and it was proving to be a difficult battle despite only having gone on for about 5 minutes. Deep within the ranks of these infected, Gustav, who was clad in a coat of flames, charged through their midst as he ripped infected to shreds one after the other. He was aiming for the weaker infected as he dashed across the place, ignoring the stronger ones to cut down their numbers faster. However, while doing this, he was also irking the more powerful infected to get them chasing after him. He knew dealing with them would take a longer time, so he evaded their attacks while making sure they continued chase. His fist tore through the chest of another infected as he proceeded to leap upwards with his arm within it. Boom! A black energy-filled ball landed on where he had just leapt from, causing an explosion to ring out. Gustav proceeded to fling the infected his hand stabbed through towards the other infected who had sent out this attack. Hover has been activated. He floated in midair as he joined his palm together with his eyes glowing an ominous red color. Chapter 990 Red Shadows Impatiences. Hover has been activated. He floated in midair as he joined his palm together with his eyes glowing an ominous red color. Gravitational displacement has been activated. A radius of more than 3,000 feet instantly trembled as a strange and powerful energy caused the ground to sink in. The infected in this area all felt great pressure upon their shoulders as they fell to the ground. Some of them got turned into meat paste as the pressure smashed them into the crumbling ground. The more powerful ones managed to hold out as their legs sank into the ground from the pressure, which decreased their speed by a whole lot. Some infected who were initially flying dropped crazily, and Gustav made use of this opportunity to attack intensely. Sprint has been activated. His body turned into a blur as he bolted across the battlefield while wielding the atomic blades. Slash! 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 As his bolted across the area, all that could be seen was brown and white lines. Ashy-colored bodies were being ripped to shreds wherever these brown and white streaks passed. Gustav's speed was quite insane as he tore through hundreds of infected in a matter of seconds. One of them flew down and landed behind him as he finished ripping another one to shreds. An encompassing dark wings made of gas spread out from this infected as Gustav suddenly found himself trapped within this place. The infected, who looked like a dried corpse with a large hole in its chest and forehead, lunged at Gustav after trapped him here. Gustav swung his atomic blade at the infected, which ended up slicing it in half only for its body to rejoin after Gustav's arm had gone through it. The flame's coat around Gustav dampened a little due to this infected, trapping Gustav's arm within itself. Hayek! The creature opened its mouth, causing a tornado of black fog to shot out of its mouth. Energy discharge has been activated. Gustav activated energy discharge, causing a wave of red energy to blast forth from his figure. Boom! The creature as well, and the attack it had just spewed out, got blasted backwards with intensity. The entire vicinity was getting corroded in the process of their battle, and Gustav could feel his skin melting. This dark cocoon he had been trapped in was unaffected by his energy discharge. The attack had bounced off it. Zing! A transparent head-sized item with a mysterious glow within appeared behind Gustav. "Can you leave this place?" Gustav asked. "This. Good. Go wreak havoc on the enemies," Gustav voiced out after a brief pause. The floating circular-shaped item flew out of the enclosed space with ease, causing the infected to show a little expression of disbelief, since it still had a bit of intelligence compared to the others. Gustav stared at the creature, who had gotten blasted quite some distance away before speaking. "I will be destroying you now, but I only sent it out there because every second counts," Gustav voiced out before charging forward. Swoosh! Miniature black hole has been activated. Swirling dark and purplish streaks formed above his right palm as an intense suction force was generated from it. The instant it slammed into the infected, it got ripped into multiple pieces before getting sucked into the small baby head-sized black hole. The black hole disappeared in the next instant, and so did the dark encompassment. The instant the environment was revealed to Gustav after the encompassment disappeared, all he could see around him were corpses of infected scattered across the place. Bang! 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 The sound of smashing and explosion rang out up ahead. A 20 feet tall robotic-like creature could be seen charging forward and pounding the infected it came across. Energy cannons protruded out of its body as it shot destructive beams all across the battlefield. This was none other than the sacred jewel which had taken the form of a gigantic bot to fight the infected just as Gustav had instructed it. Gustav wasted no time in dashing forth once more as he began to engage the infected while trying to avoid their toxins. The entire area was still not close to being chaos-free. They had barely dealt with 5% of the entire horde that had just been sent out. The entire place was teeming and crawling with them, and it was only a matter of time before the MBO officers would expend their energy completely fighting this horde if the MBO did not send in more reinforcements. Gildian City, tell us how to stop this. Gradier Xanatus voiced out to one of the four who were tied together before him. We're not telling you squat. One of them, with blood rolling down his forehead, stated. I could get the information out of you, but I'm giving you a way out from getting more hurt than you already are. Gradier Xanatus voiced out as he stood in front of them. We really do not have the time for this, so if you want extreme measures, then so shall it be. Red Shadow's eyes glowed up, shining through his mask and giving him a menacing look. Even if we were to tell you anything, there would be no stopping what is to come. We're already at the final phase, the lady tied up among the group of four stated. Diora, keep quiet. The one who spoke earlier voiced out once more. It doesn't matter, BJ, Diora voiced out in response. You know, all I have to do is get rid of your helmet completely for you to inhale toxic gas that would leave you dead in moments. Red Shadow voiced out as he squatted in front of the one who kept trying to be stubborn. If you do that, you lose your only source of possible information, BJ responded with an undisturbed tone. Okay, Red Shadow stated before suddenly stabbing his hand through BJ's neck. His hand was gleaming with a red color that made it intangible, so he didn't physically stab into BJ's neck. You're about to find out one of the reasons I'm called Red Shadow, Red Shadow stated as he pulled out something from the neck of choking BJ. Chapter 991, Separate, Task Say, Red figure was pulled out of BJ's body, and in the next instant, BJ's body fell limply, like he had passed out. The red figure in Red Shadow's grasp was an exact replica of BJ except for the fact that it was reddish. It looked like it was made out of pure energy and wasn't physical, but Red Shadow was able to hold onto this figure with ease. The eyes of this red figure was widened as he stared at Red Shadow, lifting him above the ground. I know you lots don't really care about death, Red Shadow voiced out to the reddish figure as he recalled one of them they caught earlier who committed suicide. I won't give you death, no. It'll just condemn you to a state where you have to follow me around for eternity in a state of existence and inexistence altogether. Red Shadow's voice was getting deeper and scarier as he voiced this out. It was currently around 3 in the midnight, and the moon shining down had Red Shadow's shadow displayed on the left side of the ground. However, even his shadow was currently red. Gradier Xanatus had no idea what was happening at the moment, but he could sense a dreadful energy from Red Shadow. Is he using an ability that he normally doesn't make use of? Gradier Xanatus wondered internally. While he was a little concerned, he believed Red Shadow could handle this, so he stood at the sidelines ready to pop in if things ever went out of hand. All right, enough of the explanations. Do you really want to have a taste of what I mean? Red Shadow stated, as eyes began to appear within his shadow that had turned red. All of these eyes Looker tormented, and they had no idea what exactly was going to happen if Red Shadow went through with what he was talking about, but they knew it wouldn't be anything pretty or interesting. Please, please, the red replica of BJ began begging. He was in a kind of spiritual energy form, so he could sense the dread way more than others. He could hear the other souls crying out from Red Shadow's shadow, so he knew whatever torment they were facing wasn't something he would like to experience. I'll give you one last chance, Red Shadow voiced out as he stepped forward and put the red figure back into BJ's body. In the next instant, BJ opened his eyes and let out a loud breath as his expression turned into one of panic. Red Shadow's glowing eyes calmed, and his shadow returned to normal as he spoke once more. Now, let's try this again. Who are you lots, and what is your objective? About 30 minutes later, Gradier Xanatus and Red Shadow could be seen standing in front of this tied-up bunch with looks of contemplations. Are you saying the last one amongst all of you is currently undergoing that task? Gradier Xanatus inquired. Yes, and by now he should be done, or almost done, so whatever you try to do right now won't change anything. Lechin City will fall. BJ said with a strong tone of warning. How do you locate the cemeteries? And which cemetery is the other person performing this task? Red Shadow asked. Even if we tell you how, it doesn't matter. You can't get there to stop him in time, one of them voiced out. I will not ask again, Red Shadow voiced out as his eyes glowed red ominously. New novel chapters are published on Freewebble. CM, it's in our suit. It's not hampered by the toxicity of the environment, Diora voiced out. She proceeded to explain how it worked and how they could use the suit to head over to where the last one was. Red Shadow and Gradier Xanatus stared at each other after hearing this. I'll take one of them with me. Will you take care of the others? Red Shadow stated. I'll get the others to Lechin City and circle back with one of their armors. Put an end to this if you get there on time, Gradier Xanatus voiced out. Both of them had an understanding that only one person had to go from this point, and since Red Shadow was obviously the quicker one of the duo, this role automatically fell on his shoulders. Red Shadow proceeded to grab hold of BJ and pulled him from the ropes. You're coming with me, he voiced out before opening a cross-shaped red portal and throwing him in. Red Shadow jumped in immediately afterwards, and the portal closed up. Activate confinement, Gradier Xanatus stated while tapping onto a watch on his wrist. Xian. Solid glowing pink bars appeared around the other three, surrounded them, and formed a small cell with them within. Gradier Xanatus went on to grab hold of the bars and lifted it with all three of them inside. Thuum! He leapt across the air in the next instant, heading in the direction of Lechin City. As he headed back, he recalled what these four had disclosed. It turned out they were a group sent here by an unknown force with the objective of infecting every single corpse in Gildian City with the new Ashy infection variant. They were initially 6. One had committed suicide, they caught 4, and the last one was busy with a separate task that would definitely cause the destruction of Lechin City. They were able to give set instructions to the infected, and once those instructions had been given, they couldn't be taken back. Right now, the infected, trying to run over the city, were given this primary instruction. Even though they had caught some of the culprits, the set of instructions couldn't be reversed. Red Shadow had to make sure he stopped the last one before the instruction could be given, or it would spell the end. According to the fur they caught, there were millions of infected in the same area as the last one waiting to be given instructions, but that wasn't even the worst part. There was something else, too. If you guys can get back to top 25 on the trending rank, I'll start releasing 3 chapters every day. Chapter 992. The upcoming danger. According to the fur they caught, there were millions of infected in the same area as the last one waiting to be given instructions, but that wasn't even the worst part. There was something else, too. The group had opened up about trying to revive an ancient mixed breed that was plenty times powerful than a kilo ranked mixed blood. Usually mixed breeds would be way stronger than mixed bloods, even if their level was similar in terms of how one would categorize mixed blood strength. This was an ancient mixed breed that had died centuries ago, and it was very powerful when it was alive, almost at its prime. No one would go out of their way to preserve the corpse of a mixed breed like the way humans, mixed bloods, and Slarkovs were preserved, so it was a wonder how the corpse of this ancient mixed breed wasn't disintegrated yet. The group explained the creature was really powerful when it was alive, so it would still take about 100 more years before its corpse could be disintegrated. Red Shadow didn't know much about the creature they were talking about, but Gradier Xanatus knew just how much of a danger such a creature would be when it was reawakened and turned against them. It taking order from the last one of them would spell the end for Lechin City. This was the most crucial aspect, and Red Shadow was hoping he'd arrive in time before any instructions were passed down. The millions of infected already stored at a part of Gildian City waiting to be given orders were also a massive threat, but Gradier Xanatus knew that with his rank he could ask for more reinforcements. The MBO would be willing to send more for his sake, but with the ancient mixed breed being added to the fray, the amount of reinforcements they would need to take it down will not be able to arrive on time before the city was run over. Gradier Xanatus leaped repeatedly across the air as he carried the 3 culprits back with a worried expression. The best option would be to call more in the moment I arrive back. Gradier Xanatus decided he would call for more reinforcements the instant he arrived back at the wall. Another thing was bothering him about this thing. How do they have mechanical suits that can work even within the toxic city? Even the MBO barely has any, he wondered internally as one more thought appeared in his mind. And how are they all Slarkovs? Not even one mixed blood or human. The last one was also a Slarkov. Gradier Xanatus didn't understand why, but he felt there were bigger things at play here than they could see in the meantime. Red Shadow, who had tossed BJ into the portal earlier, was speeding across a grassy path that seemed quite elevated. And NBSP, swoosh! A reddish blur could be seen as he made his way down this elevated path. A small mountain could be seen up ahead, and he could sense presences from beyond the mountain. Usually he would slow down so as not to alert the enemy, but time wasn't on their hands at this point, so his thought was to jump in first and think of the situation afterwards. Thuum! He leapt across the air while still carry BJ. Are we here? Red Shadow questioned. New novel chapters are published on Freewebble. CM, yes, just right beyond the mountain. BJ answered with a look of fear. Good, Red Shadow muttered as he landed on the small mountain. He proceeded to look forward at this instance and could see an expanse of land up front. Everywhere would look deserted, which was normal, but this particular location looked fresh compared to the rest. The area was quite silent and dark, but Red Shadow eyes instantly spotted what he was here for. In this expanse of land, a large army of infected could be seen lined up in front. Their ash-colored skin was quite clear from the top of this mountain, along with their red, bloodshot eyes, but unlike the others, they weren't making any move. They just stood there without making a sound. Red Shadow slowly stepped forward as he observed the entire vicinity. Traps, Red Shadow said internally as he noticed something after stepping forward to a point. Won't be wise to alert the enemy until I spot them, he said internally as he looked around. No matter where he looked, all he could see were tons and tons of infected scattered around. He could even spot mixed breeds amongst their ranks. This is definitely more than 1 million infected, he said internally. The situation was quite dangerous, as he couldn't find the last culprit who had been given this task. Where is he? Red Shadow asked BJ, who was kneeling beside him. He should be somewhere on the east. There's a small hatch that leads underground, BJ responded. Red Shadow turned to stare at the east, taking note of the area he was supposed to head in. BJ was still tied beside him, but he knew bringing him along would be a stupid decision, as it would slow him down. So he decided to confine BJ to this mountain. Red Shadows phased out of his shadow and proceeded to clinch onto BJ's shadow, leaving him unable to speak or move. That should do it, Red Shadow said internally before turning to stare at the east side again. Thwyish. His body suddenly blurred as he disappeared from his standing point in the next instant. Boom! An explosion rang out in his initial position, and Red Shadow had appeared about 50 feet towards the left. That was close. He muttered as he squinted his eyes. He couldn't see or sense the presence of anyone, but without a doubt he sensed something at the last second, which was why he bolted to the side. He suddenly sensed danger on his left and charged forward again. Boom! Another explosion rang out, causing rocks to be blasted to smithereens. There's someone here. Red Shadow honed his senses to the max as this thought appeared in his mind. Chapter 993. Taking ultimate combination up the notch. Truly, there was someone here, but this person was currently invisible and had their presence completely erased. This was such high-grade erasure of presence that even someone of Red Shadow's caliber could only sense when the attack was close to hitting him. He couldn't see the attack or the culprit, however, he was very sure there was someone here with him. Looks like I didn't need to go to him. He came to me instead, Red Shadow thought as he leapt backwards. Boom! Another explosion rang out where he was standing a while ago, and he began to dash around the place with speed. You made a grave mistake coming to me before doing what you had to do, Red Shadow voiced out as he kept running in circles speedily at the top of this mountain. Boom! 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 Explosions kept ringing out as he charged across the place. Red Shadow suddenly stopped after a few more explosions and stood in place while closing his eyes. There was no response when he spoke earlier, which meant whoever was here didn't want to expose their current position by saying anything. As Red Shadow stood there without making another move, there was no attack for a bit. Then, all of a sudden, he felt a bone-chilling attack only an inch away from making contact. He suddenly opened his eyes in the same instant, which was gleaming with red, ominous light. A portal suddenly appeared behind him as he turned around. The attack was swallowed up, and in that same moment, there, he muttered as he bolted forward with immense speed. Bang! His fist slammed into an invisible force, causing a loud sound of collision to ring out. A small flicker of light appeared in mid-air. As it seemed to be moving in an arc, Red Shadow leapt in the direction of the flicker, which was traveling off the mountain. Lechin City, the front of the walls surrounding Lechin City, was littered with the corpses of the infected as the battle between the MBO officers here and the infected was still very heated. Lots of infected had been destroyed during this time, but this wasn't without casualties on the end of the MBO as well. Some really strong mixed bloods infected made things difficult, and to add to all these, there were mixed breed infected here as well. Currently, there were many MBO officers on ground and in the air as well. The ones who could use long-range attacks stayed on the walls, while the ones with abilities that could only be used properly in melee combat were on the ground, fending off the infected. Gustav was currently half naked with his chest and multiple parts his body exposed due to this battle. He was covered new novel chapters are published on Freewebble, CM, in Ashigu, and even with that, he still charged forward, ripping, slicing, and destroying one infected after the other in a very speedy manner. No matter how many they killed, it seemed like the infected were never ending. He would destroy many only to find himself getting surrounded by another group in a matter of seconds. Now the issue wasn't with strength, but with endurance. Would the MBO officers be able to hold out till every single infected were wiped out before they ran out of energy? Gustav couldn't count how many infected he had killed at this moment. All of a sudden, Twai-ai, Twai-wai, Twai-hai, Twai. Numerous sounds of flapping wings reverberated across the vicinity. With the high volume, one could tell that the sound of wings flapping was coming from multiple sources. Every single officer all across the walls looked up as they were overcome with a feeling of dread. Up above, a massive horde of infected mixed breed could be seen flying towards the wall. It was currently around 5 in the morning, and the moon was still out, yet the sheer numbers of the infected mixed breeds casted numerous shadows across the land. The sky was completely covered up due to their massive numbers. Each of these mixed breeds were the size of a truck, and they had armor like brownish covering on most parts of their bodies with massive eagle-like wings. Their facial structure was like that of jackals, but more menacing with sharpened teeth and blood-red eyes. God Eyes has been activated, over 50,000. Gustav was instantly able to count the numbers of these infected, mixed breeds in the sky after activating God Eyes. With the amount here, Gustav knew that without taking things up the notch, the barrier would be broken in no time and the city would be overrun. Combination has been activated. Bloodwolf plus, Mutated Boar plus, Demonic Bunny plus, Savrina, Serpent plus, Flames, Death Ace. Gustav activated Ultimate Combination at this point. mixing up more than 6 mixed breeds at a time. His body transformed rapidly as an unbearable and powerful aura that made him unapproachable spread out from him. The infected all around were unable to approach for some time, not because they didn't want to, but because they just couldn't. All within a particular radius from Gustav were trapped in place by the powerful aura. Silver scales had appeared on Gustav's body as he grew out 6 pair of horns on his forehead. He reached a height of 12 feet as he grew bulkier and muscular all at the same time. His eyes were gleaming with multicolored lights due to the multiple streams of abilities he had access to that had also been boosted. A radiating scarlet glow appeared at the tip of his middle horn as the energy coming from his frame caused the vicinity to tremble. Gustav had never combined so many transformations at the same time. It was so intense that he felt he might have overdone it. -5000 EP. The amount of energy points gone in one transformation left him speechless. This ultimate combination wasn't one he could keep for long, or he would be drained of energy. However the situation demanded, he took things up several notches, or this would spell the end for the city. Gustav looked up with a menacing glare at this point, spotting the thousands of mixed breeds in the sky closing in on the wall. "Tremble," he stated with a deep tone. Chapter 994 Lone Battle against 50,000 flying, infected, mixed breeds. Gustav looked up with a menacing glare at this point, spotting the thousands of mixed breeds in the sky closing in on the wall. "Tremble," he stated with a deep tone. A powerful surge of transparent energy phased out from him, spreading across the vicinity. Thousands of the infected mixed breeds in the sky instantly felt weakened and dropped from the air like flies that insecticides got sprayed on. Gustav didn't even bother lunging forward. Zian, the glow at the tip of his middle horn, brightened up even more like it was building up energy. Grrrch. The ground began to tremble extremely to the extent the walls quaked as well. But as if this was not enough, the city within had started to experience a minor landquake. In the next few moments, Gustav let go of the energy he had built up. A scarlet outburst of energy rushed forth from the tip of Gustav's horn, ripping everything it came into contact with apart. The ground beneath Gustav's feet cracked from the intensity of the outburst. He began floating in air as his surroundings caved in crazily. The scarlet outburst of energy was so powerful that shooting across the sky caused a massive clearing. The group of infected mixed breeds that had filled the skies without leaving any spaces between each other earlier now had a massive gap due to Gustav's attack. He cleared more than 5,000 mixed breed infected in an instant, reducing them to nothing. The ones that were falling had taken the full brunt of the attacks, and even the infected surrounding Gustav that weren't even aimed at had all been disintegrated as well. The energy began to die down after a few moments, and smoke began to phase out of Gustav's horn. One could tell he had made use of a lot of energy to perform that attack, but it was extremely potent as it had wiped out more than 10% of the infected mixed breed coming from above in an instant. A cloud of dust had spread out over an expanse of 10,000 feet due to Gustav's attack. His area lacked good visuality due to this, but he could see well. However, nor wanting the MBO officers behind on the ground to start getting picked off one after the other by the infected, Gustav decided to do something. Fwayai! He waved his hand to the side, causing wind to spread out from the sheer intensity of his physical strength. The wind cleared out the dust that had covered the radius of 10,000 feet. The officers on the walls were still staring in his direction with an expression of disbelief, wondering how he just pulled off such a powerful attack. They had spotted his transformation from afar and the violent energy it spread forth. There was no doubt that Gustav was the most powerful MBO officer present on this battlefield. Handle the infected on land. I'll take care of the ones in the sky. Gustav spoke normally, but he had a kind of energy that caused his voice to be transported clearly all across. Every single officer on the grounds and the walls heard him clearly. Hi-yo! Hiya! Loud battle cries filled with motivation was heard after Gustav voiced out. Gustav had lifted the spirit of the MBO officers, especially after they had seen what he could achieve with just a single attack in this form. Thump! Gustav blasted off into the sky in the next instant to deal with the mixed breed infected. Swai-hai! In that same instant, he had already arrived before a group. The Jiko Hakai katana appeared in his grasp once more, and he held it tightly before swinging sideways. Thryriai! It looked like the sky was cut in two as a dangerous red arc phased out of the katana after he swung it. Thousands of these infected flying mixed breeds were instantly disintegrated into nothingness as Gustav's right arm popped out of place and nearly got ripped from the joints. This attack had dealt with thousands because of how powerful Gustav was in this form, but it took its toll on him as well. An outburst of wind generated from this attack had nearly blown the officers off the wall, which made Gustav fly further forward, so no one would be affected by the residue energy. Gustav passed the katana to his left hand as his right hand healed and swung it out once more. After thousands of them were erased from the skies, once again he proceeded to pass the katana to his right hand and swung out again. Fwai! 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 Gustav kept passing the katana from right hand to left hand and from left hand to right hand. At this point, Gustav was abusing his regenerative ability, but he didn't care. He would do whatever it took to make sure none of these mixed breeds arrived at the wall. After doing this a few more times, the entire sky was nearly cleared. Gustav had to stop now because with every forceful swing, he was depleting a lot of energy. If he kept it up, he would run out of energy in a few more seconds. Even maintaining the ultimate combination was draining, and he would have to deactivate it in a few if he didn't want to run out of energy. Gustav, seeing that only a few thousand were left, he kept the Jiko Hakai katana back in his storage device as his left arm healed up. Fwai! He charged forward across the sky like lightning arriving in front of one instantly. Grab! Gustav grabbed this one by the head and ripped it in two with his bare hands, causing whitish goo and body parts to fall from the sky. While it was falling, Gustav sent forth a milky-colored ball that disintegrated its body parts. Gustav wasted no time in heading to the next, after completing that deed that took him no more than a second. The flying, infected mixed breeds surrounded him at this point with the intention of eliminating him. However, even with the use of their wings, Gustav's speed was just too much for them. Chapter 995, Gradier, Xanatus, Return. Gustav had already arrived in front of another two and proceeded to make contact. Loud bone-crushing sounds could be heard as Gustav squeezed both heads to the point where their skulls were smashed in even with the protective armor covering. Dewush! His body blurred once more, and he arrived on another side where he punched through the gut of one of the mixed breeds before proceeding to send a charge of energy through its insides, causing it to blast to pieces. Once second Gustav was here, and in the next second, he had already destroyed more than 10 mixed breeds with the help of his physical strength. However, they were still more than 1,000, so even with the way Gustav was speedily slaughtering them, they had managed to gather around him. Gustav clasped his palms together as he noticed he had been completely covered by these mixed breed. Boom! A massive shockwave spread across the place upon contact, which sent the thousands of mixed breeds surrounding him flying backwards. As the shockwaves pushed them away, Gustav stretched out his right hand. Fwai! One of them that was spiraling across the air backwards suddenly paused. Gustav pulled his hand forward, and the mixed breed began flying towards him. Bang! Gustav punched its head off the instant it arrived before him and proceeded to speed out once more to deal with the rest. In a few minutes more, less than 100 of these infected mixed breeds were left. Ultimate combination has been deactivated. The energy surging around Gustav began to reduce, as his body transformed back into its original look. At this point, Gustav looked a bit fatigued, but they were only less than 100, so he was sure he could handle this in no time. Energy 13,000/90. 000. Gustav could see that he had spent a lot of energy points since this battle began. He decided to utilize the rest to the best of his abilities. Hover has been activated. He had to activate Hover now that he had deactivated Ultimate Combination. Swish! Swish! He flew towards the rest as atomic blades appeared in his hands. Slash! 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 While he took care of the rest, the battle on the ground was getting even more heated without Gustav's contribution. Since Gustav had been dealing with the infected mixed breeds in the sky, the other officers had been dealing with the ones on the ground. Officer Fola had arrived on scene since, and joined the others in fighting back the infected as well. He had a bloodline related to energy accumulation, which he could use in so many different ways. Him joining the many other MBO officers had helped to keep the invasion at bay, but the situation was still looking quite hopeless. At this point, there were lots of casualties, and the MBO officers had seen their fellow comrades die and turned into one of the infected on this battlefield. With the number of infected still approaching, it looked like no matter how much they killed, they would never end. Gustav had initially counted the numbers heading here and was able to tell that there were over 1 million, and with this battle ongoing for hours now, they had not managed to clear up to 40% of the infected. Gustav had given the moral by slaughtering up to 50,000 infected all by himself in a matter of minutes, but this moral was slowly dying down as the number of causality on the MBO side increased. Their numbers had dwindled from over 5,000 to 3,000 in the hours they had been fending off these infected. It was a good ratio compared to the number of infected they had gotten rid of, but with the MBO not sending reinforcements at the moment, the lower their numbers, the harder the battle becomes, which would result in more casualties at an even faster rate. This situation was becoming exceedingly dangerous with every passing seconds. Kairarf! Cries rang out once more as some other MBO officers fighting beside Fola were slaughtered. Fola quickly dashed in that direction and proceeded to get rid of the corpses with an energy bomb before they could turn into one of the infected. His breathing was heavy at this point, and he was nearly out of energy, but he still kept battling against them. He had become more crowded by the infected after some of the ones besides him got slaughtered, and he had to deal with them swifter than before. "I won't let the city be overrun," he said internally as he sent another ball of energy into the mouth of a mixed breed, causing its internals to implode. Suddenly, a mixed breed with insanely quick speed appeared from behind while slashing with its claws. Officer Fola had good reaction speed, but was nearly mauled. He managed to grab hold of the infected mixed breed paws, causing him to slide backwards due to the intensity. It was a struggle as he held them in place and tried to fight back, but before he knew it, he had been surrounded by the infected once more. His eyes widened as they lunged at him and were only an instant away from sending him to the afterlife. All of a sudden, a massive outburst of energy slammed into the infected circling him, causing them to be blasted to pieces. He gasped with a confused look as a boulder-sized rectangular structure came falling from the sky. Bang! It landed directly on the infected mixed breed in front of him, turning it to meat paste. In this instant, he noticed he had been saved, but what he saw within this rectangular structure surprised him. The rectangular structure was more like a mini prison with glowing bars, and there were 3 people within. He was still staring with a confounded look when someone landed behind him. "Are you okay?" A familiar voice rang out. He turned around and spotted Gradier Xanatus. "Yes, sir." He quickly responded with a respectful expression. "If you're exhausted, take refuge on the wall," Gradier Xanatus said as he turned around and sent out a punch, which caused shockwaves to spread across the place. Chapter 996 Arrival of Reinforcements. "If you're exhausted, take refuge on the wall," Gradier Xanatus said as he turned around and sent out a punch, which caused shockwaves to spread across the place. "But sir, I need to help out." Fola voiced out in resistance, but Great Ears Anatus quickly cut him short. You're almost out of bloodline energy. Take refuge on the wall. I'll have called in reinforcements. They will be arriving soon. You won't be any good to anyone if you die here, Great Ears Anatus stated. Officer Fola was taken aback for a second before he nodded and replied respectfully, "Yes, sir." After saying this, he leapt into the air and flew back towards the wall. Great Ears Anatus looked up and could see several ripped-apart bodies falling from the sky. Before they made contact with the ground, they were hit by a ball of milky light that caused them to start disintegrating. "Gustav!" Great Ears Anatus voiced out as he spotted the person responsible for that. Boom! 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 A 20 feet tall robotic-looking machine could be seen sending forth explosions that wreaked havoc across the battlefield. Great Ears Anatus couldn't recognize this technological, mixed-blood machine, especially since it didn't have the MBO emblem on its back. Who's riding that? He wondered internally, but in that same instant. Bam! Gustav landed on the ground up ahead, sending out another shockwaves across the vicinity that caused multiple infected to be blasted backwards. "Great Ears Anatus, you're back!" Gustav voiced out as he turned around. "You're covered in their ashy substance," Great Ears Anatus said with a look of concern as Gustav moved towards him. "It's fine, I'm immune." Gustav didn't feel the need to hide this from Great Ears Anatus, so he voiced it out. Great Ears Anatus' face displayed a look of relief after hearing that. "Who are these? The orchestrators?" Gustav asked as he spotted the glowing cage behind with 3 people within. "Some of them, yes," Great Ears Anatus responded. "I'll fill you in at the top of the wall," Great Ears Anatus voiced out as he picked up the cage. "There's no time. I can't leave them to handle it on their own," Gustav voiced out as he hinted at the battlefield. "Reinforcements are arriving in a few. They'll be okay," Great Ears Anatus stated as he leapt towards the wall with the cage in his grasp. Gustav pounded a few more infected before lighting himself on fire to get rid of the ashy substance all over. He proceeded to turn around and leap forward. The wall was at least 3,000 feet away, but he arrived above it in nearly an instant. Gustav landed atop the wall and moved to where Great Ears Anatus was standing with the culprits. "Where is Red Shadow?" Gustav asked. Great Ears Anatus had a look of troubled and urgent expression on his face as he began narrating how things had gone after Gustav helped them locate the culprits. A few minutes later, Gustav had a look of understanding as he moved closer to the cage. Great Ears Anatus had finished narrating how Red Shadow and him had to split up since he had to bring these ones back while Red Shadow had to find the last person. He had also mentioned how the current amount of infected they were currently fighting against was nothing compared to the amount that hadn't been given set instructions yet. Gustav calculated based on what Great Ears Anatus disclosed and realized the infected that waiting to get sent out was at least 6 times more than the infected they had spent the entire night fending off. The casualty number had climbed, and it would even be worse if this amount was to be sent out at the same time. Currently, MBO reinforcements were arriving one after the other in the hundreds. Also, more than 70% of the infected had been erased at this point, so the reinforcements arriving were a great help in holding the line without Gustav's input. No matter how many reinforcements the MBO sends out next, with what Gustav had heard about the creature they were trying to revive with the infection, the city would be lost unless they just decided to blow everything to bits. The MBO had the power to end everything at this instant, but since preserving lives had always been the priority, they still had to try and protect all the citizens living here. If they decided to be extreme, all lives here would end. Have they told you guys everything they know, or we still need to hound them for more information? Gustav voiced as he moved closer to the cage and stared at the people within. There's no time to try and get more information from them at the moment. We've gotten what we need for now, Great Ears Anatus responded. I need to head back into Gildian City to help Red Shadow, he added. He had taken a little longer than expected to arrive back at the wall because he took a stop once he arrived at an area where he could make use of communication tools. He had to explain to the higher-ups that the situation here is worse than they thought and gave them some minute details. It took some time to get them to send the amount of reinforcements Gradier Zanatus had requested. Bam! 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 Currently, over 300 robotic, mixed blood machines with experienced officers within were landing from the sky all across different places in the battlefield. More powerful officers were arriving as well, and the current number of infected were being dealt with at a quicker pace with the amount of reinforcements arriving. Over 1,000 AI bots were also being deployed from a massive aircraft that had just arrived in the sky. It seemed having a high rank in the MBO was truly noteworthy, seeing how much reinforcements was being sent due to Gradier Zanatus' request. In just a matter of minutes, more than 10,000 reinforcements of different kinds had arrived from the MBO, and more were still said to be on their way. Boom! 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 Explosives were being dropped on the infected that were still alive from several aircraft as well. Chapter 997 The Fall of Lechin Cities. In no time, the infected left were only small in number and would be completely erased soon. However, even with all these, Gradier Zanatus was well aware that, should Red Shadow fail, all these reinforcements would only be delaying the inevitable. The fall of Lechin City, and all of its residents too. "I'm coming with you," Gustav stated after Gradier Zanatus voiced out his intentions of heading back, just in case Red Shadow needed help. "No, I need you to remain here and man the wall," Gradier Zanatus said while shaking his head. Gustav turned to the left to stare beyond the wall. "There's already more than enough reinforcements on ground to handle the current number of infected here," Gustav voiced in response. "Still, it'll be better if you remained here and take command of the officers. If things end up going bad, I'm sure you will be able to hold the lines till I return," Gradier Zanatus stated while tapping onto Gustav's shoulder. "I'm faster than you. I'll get to him way earlier than you can." "Let me come with you," Gustav replied with a resilient tone. He felt since they were on a topic of time and speed, it would be best for him to go with or even go alone. Fair point, but Gustav. Gradier Zanatus was about to refuse again when Gustav sensed something. "Wait," he voiced out with a tone of urgency. "Huh," Gradier Zanatus uttered as he noticed Gustav's odd expression. "Hover has been activated." Gustav suddenly ascended into the air with extreme speed. Gradier Zanatus didn't have the ability to fly, but he had a flight device strapped to his feet. He activated it and flew up as well. "Kid is fast." I guess he wasn't wrong, Gradier Zanatus thought as he tried to reach Gustav's current height in the sky, which was quite difficult. "What's wrong?" Gradier Zanatus voiced out as he reached Gustav's height in the sky. "He failed," Gustav answered while staring downwards with glowing golden and red eyes. "What?" Gradier Zanatus voiced out with a tone of disbelief. "He failed to stop it," Gustav repeated with a grave tone as he turned to stare at Gradier Zanatus. "The millions of infected are on their way," he added, causing a Gradier Zanatus to be overcome with a feeling of dread. What about the mixed breed?" This question slipped out of his lips as his face shone with an intensely troubled expression. "I don't see any." Gustav was responding as he turned to look downwards, up ahead once more before suddenly turning silent. He could spot a gigantic figure over 100 miles ahead within an uncountable swarm of infected. This fit the exact description Gradier Zanatus had given him earlier. "It's coming as well," Gustav confirmed as he retracted his sight. "This city is done for," he added. "Dashed 20 minutes ago, Gildian City. Now there's no way you will be able to give out any commands," Red Shadow voiced out as he sighed in relief. In front of him now was a man in dark and silver technological suit. He also had a slightly cracked helmet put on, and some red shadows could be seen connected to his. They were currently at the foot of the mountain Red Shadow bound BJ2. Behind them, the hordes of infected, which numbered in the millions, could be seen. It turned out this was the last culprit, and Red Shadow had managed to bind him here after defeating him. The technological suit he currently had on was so advanced it made him invisible and completely erased his presence earlier on, which made things a little difficult for Red Shadow. However, with Red Shadow being a seasoned veteran in the field of completing dangerous missions, he managed to use his experience and sharp intuition to bring the last culprit down. Asterisk cough cough asterisk, I see, and I was so close to completing the last phase too, the man in the suit voiced out with a few coughs. You have amassed quite the number of infected. Tell me. Red Shadow squatted in front of him as he spoke. Will they ever move without a command? Red Shadow inquired. They want. The man in the black and silver suit responded. Good. Where is the corpse of the creature you plan to revive? Red Shadow asked. The last culprit was unable to move his body, but his eyes shifted to the side, revealing that he was staring in a particular direction. Underground over there? Red Shadow voiced out as he turned to stare in the same direction. How did you manage to? The man in the suit was speaking when Red Shadow interrupted. We got the rest of your comrades too. BJ told me there was an underground space in that direction. Surely you must have seen that I have him bound up there, just like I did to you down here, Red Shadow added. The last culprit had a look of defeat as he stared down. Red Shadow stood upright at this point and turned around to stare in the same direction. You're the last one, and luckily I was able to get you before you gave the command, Red Shadow voiced out once more as he began taking steps forward. Who said I was the last one? The man in black and silver suit suddenly voiced out. This chapter is updated by Friedenville, CM. Red Shadow paused his footsteps at this point as a sense of foreboding washed over him. What do you mean? Red Shadow eyes squinted as he questioned. Who said I was the last one? His lips curved into a mischievous smile as the man in black and silver suit repeated the same question. Red Shadow's eyes suddenly widened as he turned around to stare forward. Swish! The instant he sped forward, a loud voice spread forth from invisible loudspeakers. Trample upon the lands and overrun the next city you encounter on your way southwards. Swish! Red Shadow had gotten into the underground entrance and was speeding down a tunnel way, but it seemed like it was too late. Destroy everything in your path. Regardless of what it is, and await further instructions upon overrunning the next city. Chapter 998. Doom arrives bang. A loud blast suddenly resounded across the area as the speaker stopped making sound. Red Shadow had gotten hold of the person who was responsible, but the deed was already done. Currently, the millions of infected on the surface had begun to move according to the command they had been given. Bam! 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 Numerous feet trampling upon the ground reverberated across the vicinity as these infected charged forward. The ceiling of the underground area trembled repeatedly as dust drizzled down. Within a space with multiple technological equipment and holographic screens all over, Red Shadow held onto the neck of a lady with silver-colored hair. She was also in technological suit, but underground she didn't wear her helmet since this space was untainted till Red Shadow broke through it. GHHRGGGGBBBBBLLL. The underground area trembled intensely as a loud crash was heard from underneath. Red Shadow didn't need to see before he knew that the creature that was being kept here was getting out of the underground area. Red Shadow could feel indescribable and domineering energy from the creature, as well as its gigantic size. Stop this right now and ask them to come back here. Red Shadow voiced out as his eyes turned menacingly red. I'm afraid I cannot do that, she responded. KRHHHCCH. Red Shadow tightened his hand around her neck, causing some sounds to ring out as her trachea nearly collapsed from the inside. It wasn't a request, Red Shadow stated. They want, lease, 10, till they, become. Plet the task quired of them, she said while grimacing in pain. Red Shadow had heard this before, so he knew she wasn't completely telling a lie or telling a lie at all. Still do it before they all get away, he stated with a sharp tone before letting her go. She landed on her feet and dropped to her knees as she coughed repeatedly. Looking up, she spotted Red Shadow's menacing glare and quickly jumped to her feet. The technological suit, almost covering her entire figure, completely expanded. It covered up her neck and reached her chin area before stopping. Come back. Her voice traveled far and wide across the vicinity as she spoke with a calm tone. Great Ears Anatus sent his senses out, and to his expected disappointment, there was no response from the infected charging towards Lechin City. Again, he knew it would be of no use, but he was holding onto a last string of hope that the millions of infected would listen and Lechin City would be saved. Come back here. Desist from overrunning the city. She yelled out once more, but to no avail. Red Shadow's eyes were laced with disappointment and frustration as he sent out a fist. New novels chapters are published en Freewebble, CM. Bam! The silver-haired lady got sent flying and slammed into the wall before passing out. Red Shadow proceeded to grab her and sped out of the tunnel. On his way out, he spotted a massive hole that had spread across the ceiling within the tunnelway. Red Shadow leapt out through it and could already spot the millions of infected heading towards Lechin City from the back as they even trampled upon one another. A dark and gigantic figure towering, so tall that it reached the sky, could be spotted as well. Shit! Red Shadow couldn't help but just curse as he spotted this. It turned out he had been fooled by BJ and the others. They mentioned only one person was left, but it was actually two, a male and a female. Red Shadow was unable to sense the last person amongst the culprits due to her staying underground. The person he was fighting earlier, who he thought to be the last person, and also the person who would give the command, was just the one surveilling the environment, just in case. He had managed to delay Red Shadow and gave his partner just enough time to make the commands. Now there was nothing that could be done to stop these infected with a mixture of mixed breeds, mixed bloods, humans, and Slarkovs. They may have caught the culprits, but right now the situation was like winning the battle while losing the war. Red Shadow proceeded to drop the last lady with her partner and bound her in place as well. Red Shadow was unbothered about transporting them at the moment. He could come get them later since there was no escaping his shadow restraints, especially when they were all Slakovs. I need to at least deal with the big one before it gets to the wall, Red Shadow said internally as he created a portal in front of him. Zen's Hinin. As the flower-shaped portal opened, he moved in and it closed behind him. Thousands of feet ahead, a red portal appeared far above the sky. Red Shadow figure phased out of it and began to fall across the sky. His body was falling towards the head of a towering, tall beast, like creature with ashy skin. Rending Red Shadow seal. Red Shadow voiced loudly as a massive red silhouette appeared behind him while he fell. Swai, swai, sweehi, swai. Red shadows began to phase out of the silhouettes in the hundreds. As these shadows phased out, they mixed with the shadow of the massive creature. Bam! Red Shadow landed on the head of the creature with his fist slamming onto its crown. The creature made a low growl that showed it was a little disturbed by the attack, but not so much. The creature's head had similarities with that of a bald lion. Its head had curvy horns protruding from every side, which made it look like the creature was wearing a crown. It had golden and dark eyes, which were up to 8 in number, with a massive muscular body, standing on 2 legs like a man, but extremely furry. It had ashy furs all over with a diamond-shaped object embedded into its chest area. The diamond-shaped object embedded into its chest area was the only part of its body with a different color besides its eyes. Chapter 999 Red Shadow's Defeats was bigger than 3 human beings, placed side by side due to the creature's massiveness. For thick vine-like tails could be seen protruding from its rear as well, and to top it all off, it was more than 4,000 feet tall. The wall surrounding the city was only 3,000 feet tall, yet this creature was over 1,000 feet taller. This already spelled doom for Lechin City. With the amount of energy Red Shadow felt from it, he was sure no one would be able to defeat it amongst the officers unless with joint effort. The problem was with the millions of other infected also approaching the city. Dividing forces to take care of this creature, as well as the infected, would be ineffective. It would only last for a bit before everyone was either annihilated or the city was forcefully penetrated. Red Shadow decided he would do all he could to keep the creature in place and damage it. At this point, one of the massive thick vine-like tails of the creature was stabbing towards its head area, where Red Shadow was situated. The shadows he had sent out earlier has mixed with the shadow of the creature and were up to 1,000 in number. Freeze! Red Shadow voiced out just when the vine-like tails was close to making contact. Grarum! The shadow of the creature suddenly turned red, and it found itself unable to move an inch. Skrsh hex! The creature made an incomprehensible sound as it lost control of its body movement. Finding itself trapped in place, it struggled to move, but to no avail. Red Shadow, who stood atop his head, had a struggling expression as he bound his hands before leaping forward. He had only managed to stop the creature from moving for a few seconds, yet he was already sweating so much as it happened to be a cumbersome task. Red Shadow landed on the nose of the creature and began to gather immense energy as his entire body lit up with a red glow. Hi-ya! He yelled out as he drew his left arm back to the limit before, throwing his fist forward at one of the 4 left eyes of the creature. Bang! A loud sound of collision reverberated across the place as Red Shadow's fist pierced through one of the gigantic left eye of the creature. Although the energy surrounding him dimmed a little, his arm was still glowing intensely as he pulled it out of the creature's eye. KRRRYYXXXHHH. Ashy goo poured out of its eye intensely as the creature cried out in pain once more. Skrkrks-cheechek. This time its voice was at least 100 times louder than before, and the entire environment quaked intensely due to it. The grounds began to split apart as the creature struggled intensely to free itself from Red Shadow's restraint, while one of its left eye bled a fountain. However, Red Shadow was still not done. Despite sweating crazily, he punched forward multiple more times to make sure he ruined more of the eyes of the creature. Bang! 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 Squishy and popping sounds rang out as he managed to get the rest of the 3 left eyes, which at this point were completely ruined. Gradier's Inatus glow had dimmed by a whole lot at this point, and he was sweating buckets. His entire outfit was drenched in salty liquid. Gradier's Inatus was not ready to give in yet, despite nearly expending his bloodline energy completely. He reached towards the right and was about to get down and destroying the rest of the creature's eyes. Kidjararhul. The creature suddenly yelled out again as its entire body vibrated intensely. Red Shadow's eyes widened as one of the tails of creature suddenly arrived by his side. It was too late for him to dodge, but he managed to create a portal. Bang! The thick vine-like tail with crystallized features slammed into the back of the creature's head where Red Shadow had directed the portal to. However, Red Shadow was unaware that he wasn't in the green yet. Before he knew it, another tail had appeared behind him. Bang! This one slammed directly onto his back, causing him to collide with the thick face of the creature. Red Shadow felt like he was hit with the full moving force of multiple mountains joined together. To make matters worse, he was low on energy, so the protective aura always surrounding him had thinned out a whole lot. Bone-cracking sounds rang out, and Red Shadow found himself slowly losing consciousness as he fell. Before his eyes closed up completely, he felt his figure grabbed by another crystallized tail of the creature. Bang! He figure was flung to the back and slammed into a mountain hundreds of feet away. The gigantic mixed-breed infected that had managed to regain control of his body wasn't done with the insect that had just damaged his left eye. It picked Red Shadow up again and slammed him into the ground multiple times with his tail. It still wasn't done with him and flung him into the air before repeated, swinging out all of its four tails. Bang! 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 Red Shadow's unconscious body was being smacked from place to place in midair by the ruthless, infected mixed breed. Bone-cracking sounds just kept ringing out as blood oozed out of Red Shadow's orifices in the process of being smacked around. The creature decided it had had enough dealing with the ant that made it furious and proceeded to raise one of its hand to give the finishing attack. Its muscular arm rose up above Red Shadow's unconscious body that was falling from the air, and it proceeded smacked downwards with his hand like it was dealing with a mosquito. Its massive palm descended with speed and intensity to the extent that before it even collided with the grounds had already split open from the sheer force. Bang! He slammed Red Shadow's unconscious body into the ground with its gigantic palm, causing the earth to split apart across a radius of close to 100 miles. Chapter 1000 Last line of defense. After it had finished doing that, the creature proceeded to continue moving. It was unfazed by how it had further destroyed the environment and began walking forward after dealing with the supposed troublesome insect. It was unknown whether Red Shadow was alive or not. A gigantic pit had been formed where the earth had caved in. Bam! 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 The creature continued on its way towards the wall with the other millions of infected surrounding it. They all seemed like ants compared to it, despite the fact that some infected were rather massive since they were mixed breeds as well. The disturbance with Red Shadow had caused some of them to get stomped to meat paste by the massive creature, but with its low-level intelligence, it was unconcerned about friendly fire. The main aim still remained overrunning Lechin City and destroying everything that stood in its way. The present, this city is done for, Gustav voiced out as he looked up ahead. Gradier Xanatus made a low hissing sound as he spread out his senses as well. Do you see Red Shadow? Gradier Xanatus questioned. No. Gustav voiced out with a worried tone. But I do see holes where the left eyes of the creature were located, Gustav added. He must have engaged the creature. Gradier Xanatus stated as he began gathering energy. Let's hope he escaped somewhere after dealing that level of damage on the Jesadanim, Gradier Xanatus added as his eyes turned light blue. The Jesadanim was the name of this creature when it still lived centuries back. It was a guardian of Gildian City back then and was on the side of the residents, but right now it could only listen to the command it had been given. Based on what Gustav had heard about it, he knew it was almost on the level of Tabitha, who was trapped in the underground dungeons of the MBO camp. This creature would be capable of destroying the entire city itself, yet it was being accompanied by an army of millions. Gustav had a bad feeling welling from within, but they both knew that going to look for Red Shadow at the moment, when they were one of the most powerful forces on the battlefield, would reduce the MBO chances of winning against this horde when their odds were already very low. It'll inform the others of the impending danger and request for more reinforcements, Gradier Xanatus voiced out as he flew downwards towards the wall. Gustav also flew downwards as well, but he headed towards a particular direction of the wall. Quickly. Bang. He landed in front of a chocolate-skinned officer with white curly hair. I need your help, Gustav voiced out. Huh. Officer Fola exclaimed with a look of curiosity. Remember Red Shadow, the masked man with Gradier Xanatus, when this whole thing began? Gustav inquired. Yes, I do. Why? Officer Fola asked. I want you to find him. Gustav stated before he began explaining a few things to Fola about what was coming and what he assumed had happened so far. You think he might need help or may be trapped behind the millions of infected heading here? Officer Fola exclaimed with a slightly disturbed expression. Yes, I'll be battling the infected, so I won't have the chance to look for him. Gustav answered. "It'll do, but how will I get past the tall creature?" Officer Fola said with a look of decisiveness and contemplation at the same time. "I'll keep it busy, also." Gustav voiced out as he moved closer to Fola and placed his hand on his left shoulder. "Can I trust you?" Gustav questioned. Fola had a curious look as he had heard that. "Yeah, sure." That's not very convincing, but should you leak what I'm about to do to anyone, it'll send you to the afterlife," Gustav threatened. "Huh." Fola eyes widened as he muttered. "Bloodline transfer has been activated. Are you ready to defend this wall to the very end?" "Aye." "Go out there and send them to hell." "Aye." Loud battle cries rang out as the current number of MBO officers on the ground charged forward at the incoming horde infected after Gradier Zenatus' briefing. He had told them about the incoming wave that was way more than the numbers that had appeared earlier. He didn't give them the exact amount because he didn't want to weaken their morale. Only himself, Red Shadow, and Gustav knew the full information about what they were currently facing. There were up to 20,000 MBO officers here, presently with more than 10,000 mixed blood mechanical bot from the HMR Warfare Department manned by experienced officers. There were also more than 20,000 AI bots that had been sent as reinforcements. This made the total force of the MBO officers here increase by a whole lot, but this was an army of 60,000, plus going against one of over 6 million, all enhanced with a very powerful mixed breed also on their side. The odds were not in their favor at all. Gradier Zenatus had once more requested for the city to be evacuated before engaging in the battle, but the higher-ups were still debating on it. They were the last defense this city had, and Gradier Zenatus decided they would try their best to prevent the infected from getting through, even though it was looking like an impossible task. Swish Gustav was way faster than Gradier Zenatus, so he had already gone past a lot of the infected from above. Massive bat-like wings had sprouted out of his back as he flew forward with speed and arrived in front of the massive creature. Ashy goo was still pouring out of the left side of the Gisodinum's face. Now that Gustav was closer, he could sense the energy of the creature better and knew that defeating this creature was not something he could do alone. It swung its hand at Gustav the moment he spotted the insect like being flying in front of it. Gustav was still able to move to the side in mid-air as he landed on the creature's arm and began running across it. Sprint has been activated. Chapter 1001 Battle with Gisodinum Reed, author's note below. As Gustav was still able to move to the side in mid-air as he landed on the creature's arm and began sprinting across it. Sprint has been activated. The creature was aware of the presence on his arm and proceeded to wave its second gigantic hand, trying to swat Gustav like a fly. Gustav leapt upwards at this time as a gigantic milky-colored sword appeared in his grasp. He stabbed the sword forward as his body flew towards the forehead area of the creature. At this same instant, one of the creature's crystallized vine-like tail swung towards Gustav from the right. It looked like it was too fast and was already centimeters away from making contact with Gustav when he spotted it. Sweehii! Before it could make contact, Gradier Zenatus appeared beside Gustav's with his palm straightened and swung out. Bam! Gradier Zenatus' palm that was covered with a bluish glow slammed into the vine, causing a metallic clang to ring out. "You may be faster, but I have better reaction speed," Gradier Zenatus voiced out after repelling the tail. "I had it," Gustav stated as the gigantic 20 feet atomic sword stabbed into the forehead of the Gisodinum. The creature made a low grunt as the atomic blade only managed to pierce its forehead for about half a feet. For a creature as large as this, that was barely a flesh wound. Gustav was astonished at the resistance of this creature's body. It was so tough that atomic disintegration found it hard to get rid of its skin even when he used enough force with the blade. Fwaiai! The creature's hand came crashing forward with the intention of slapping Gustav off its face again. Gustav swung forward and placed both feet on the Gisodinum's face before pushing backwards with force. A small flesh-ripping sound rang out as his body flew backwards while he pulled the atomic sword out of its forehead. Ashy goo oozed out of the small wound for a bit, while Gustav managed to dodge swing of the creature's hand. He paused after dodging and swung out his arm once more with intensity. The blade cleaved through the creature's wrist area, but only cut in lightly. The creature made another loud noise as it swung its arm around, while Gustav's atomic blade was still stuck in its sturdy skin. Gustav let go of the atomic sword to avoid being swung away, while the atomic sword disintegrated into light particles. However, he had underestimated the strength of the creature. Fwoosh! Even after letting go, the wind generated from the swing of Gisodinum's palm was so fierce, Gustav found himself getting tossed across the place by a force that was 20 times worse than a tornado. Gradier Xanatus was currently behind the creature, and at the moment his hand was swinging towards its neck area. Bang! 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 His palm, which was still gleaming with blue light, slammed multiple times into the neck of the creature, causing loud sounds of collision to ring out. Gisodinum was about to take opportunity of the winds, tossing Gustav around and send a critical attack towards him when Gradier Xanatus' attacks hit. While it only felt like a pebble kept hitting him at his neck area, it was nevertheless disturbing. Gisodinum made a loud growl as it reached out to grab Gradier Xanatus, who managed to escape its swing by a hair length. Gustav managed to stabilize himself at this point, but Gradier Xanatus was in danger. Multiple of Gisodinum's tail was headed towards him from all sides, and Gradier Xanatus wasn't quick enough. Bam! Bam! He managed to react in time and slam his palm into 3 of them, repelling them. However, the 4th one was only inches from slamming into him from above when Gustav arrived before him. Swayahai! The atomic blade in his hand slammed heavily into the tail, cutting halfway through before sending flying in the opposite direction. Yes, I'm still faster, and so is my reaction speed, Gustav voiced out, causing Gradier Xanatus to chuckle. We might not be able to beat it, but stalling it is possible, Gradier Xanatus voiced out as the thrusters beneath his feet blasted out intensely, causing him to fly towards the left with speed. The massive arm of the creature had appeared in between both of them in the next instant. Stall it for what? If we cannot beat it, we might as well have lost the battle, Gustav voiced out as he flew forward. Stall it for long enough till the world government makes a decision about the fate of this city, Gradier Xanatus answered as he brought his fist down upon the hand of the creature. Bang! The creature's arm swayed downwards from the hit, and Gustav proceeded to stab another gigantic atomic sword into Gisodinum's shoulder. He positioned it so well, it stabbed more than 3 feet deep into the joint area. Gustav still didn't let go of the blade, even after he sensed the second hand of the creature swatting towards him. Hiya! He screamed out as he increased the size of the atomic sword while it was still embedded in the shoulder area of the creature. Zethiites. The atomic sword grew from 20 feet long and 3 feet wide to 60 feet long and 7 feet wide. At this point, it had stabbed more than 10 feet deep into the creature's body, which made it easier since it was already embedded into its body. However, at this same moment, the other hand arrived behind Gustav. Bang! Gradier Xanatus arrived in time and managed to stop it from going further, as Gustav kept increasing the length of the atomic blade. Gustav's hand trembled intensely as he expended lots of energy while still pushing further. Gradier Xanatus, that had managed to stop the hand of the creature in the meantime, was also trembling even while mustering all the energy he could. Are you there? Gradier Xanatus asked while a groan escaped from his lips. Almost. Gustav answered as sweat dribbled down his forehead. Chapter 1002 Gisodinum uses a familiar ability Swayai. Shwihai. Shiai. Swai. The four tails of the creature came swinging at them in the next instant, and with both of them being preoccupied with what they were doing, there was no way to stop this. Suddenly, a muscular lady in orange-patterned MBO uniform appeared from above. "Kaya!" She screamed out as she unleashed two fists covered by massive metallic gauntlets while falling from the air. Bang! She slammed into the first tail and propelled herself up with a metallic board that just appeared in midair. Bang! Bang! Bam! She moved extremely quickly, leaping from place to place as she punched the tails of the Jasadanim away. It sounded like metal was colliding with another metal as her smooth, black, metallic gauntlets slammed into Jasadanim tails. After the crisis had been averted, Gustav's body transformed into that of a mixture between the demonic bunny and the mutated boar. This wasn't with the power of combination, as Gustav could combine two of his transformations without having to use them. His arms budged intensely as his muscles expanded. He forcefully pushed the atomic sword deeper into the creature as he also expanded it. "Kayaha!" He yelled out as he pushed forward, while Gradier Zanatus restrained the second arm and the officer that had just arrived dealt with the tails. Gustav was increasing the atomic sword size to the extent that it had already stabbed more than halfway through the joint area of Jasadanim, and it would completely cut through in a little more time. Jasadanim growled with a loud voice as he got tired of these disturbances, while also feeling that this bunch were about to deal great damage like the insect earlier. The massive diamond-shaped, golden-colored item embedded in its chest area suddenly glowed up. It's about to use it. "Disengage!" Gradier Zanatus yelled out. "I'm almost there." Gustav shouted out in response as he kept pushing. "Disengage right now." Gradier Zanatus yelled out, but still didn't let go of the creature's arm because he knew Gustav would be affected. Gustav could sense a familiar energy as the massive diamond-shaped item embedded in the chest of the creature glowed up, but he couldn't put his thumb on the exact source of this familiarity. Suddenly a spectrum of energy traveled from the edges to the middle of the massive diamond energy, and in the next instant, Thowish, Dryaninzinzin, a golden wave traveled forth from the creature, spreading across the surroundings. Ugh! 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 This wave traveled across the entire vicinity, surrounding even the army of infected and the MBO officers, all battling on the wall as well as the ground. "I can't move," the lady who was about to throw a fist earlier voiced as she stood on a metallic board. Gradier Zanatus also paused in place. "I told you to disengage. You mentioned this power. How come it affects even everyone on the battlefield?" Gustav voiced out as he also froze in place, unable to keep pushing the atomic sword forward. His hand hung on the hilt of the atomic blade as his body just froze in place, while every other person on the battlefield, ranging from the infected to even the MBO officers, paused in place as well. "Why do you think the creature is way dangerous than it's supposed to be? This is just one of its overwhelming power," Gradier Zanatus voiced in response. He had wanted them to get far enough so they wouldn't be affected by this power when it was activated. This is cosmic superiority. Gustav's eyes widened as he realized why he felt this energy was familiar. "Yes, it is," the system answered from within. "How?" Gustav said internally with a surprised look, who said only mixed bloods or other supernatural aliens were capable of achieving cosmic superiority. "Even beasts can achieve it if they're blessed and chosen by the cosmos," the system replied. Ugh! Gradier Zanatus made a loud groaning sound as Jasadanim grabbed hold of him. Bone-cracking sounds began to ring out as he squeezed Gradier Zanatus in his massive hand. It proceeded to grab hold of the other officer with its other hand as well, while Gustav was still hanging from the massive atomic sword still embedded in its shoulder. It seemed to have decided to ignore Gustav in the meantime while wanting to deal with these two first, and leave Gustav for last. Within the city, they were wondering why the everywhere had gone silent. They had no idea it was due to this massive mixed breed putting everyone, including the millions of infected, into a frozen state. Gustav had a conflicted expression as he watched the creature slowly crushing both of them in its hand. He was unable to move, channel his bloodline, or even use any ability in this state, just like the others. There was only one thought crossing his mind right now, and that was the only option he had. He had initially decided he was never going to make use of his cosmic superiority, since this was not only a battlefield filled with thousands of officers, but they would also be affected by it if he was to use it. However, there seemed to be no other option at the moment, as Gradius Anatus would meet his end if Gustav decided not to act at this moment. He now understood why Jesadanim was feared, and Gradius Anatus saw it as an impossible mission to win. Let's see whose cosmic superiority is more powerful, Gustav muttered as he closed his eyes. Suddenly, Xian, a mixture of pinkish and reddish energy, blasted forth from his frame the instant he opened his eyes. A cross-shaped glow could be seen in his pupils as the powerful energy blasted forth from his frame, causing Jesadanim to step back in disbelief. Not only was Gustav's Yarki abnormal, it had effects that Jesadanim's Yarki didn't have. Jesadanim could feel a weird urge building up from within, which caused its knees to nearly buckle. It felt the urge to kneel like it was in the presence of a superior being. However, it fought back with its own Yarki. Chapter 1003 Gustav versus Jesadanim. It felt the urge to kneel like it was in the presence of a superior being. However, it fought back with its own Yarki. The wave of golden energy blasted forth from its chest area again, trying to battle with that of Gustav's. However, the instant Gustav activated his Yarki, he regained the ability to move. He let go of the atomic sword and slowly elevated as he stared down at the creature. How is he able to move? Gradius Anatus wondered internally with a look of shock. This was the same as the other female officer, as well as the many officers on the battlefield that could spot him. Someone is moving. How is he unaffected? What was that energy he just released? What did he just do? Such thoughts ran through the minds of many officers as their eyes were locked in Gustav's direction. Gustav's Yarki was not taking full effect due to Jesadaним's Yarki clashing with it. Both Yarkis were currently fighting for supremacy. However, one effect that was prevalent was everyone still standing with the inability to move. The domineering wave of Gustav's Yarki made everyone's feet buckle as they found they falling to the ground on their knees. The infected and the officers were all affected by this, but the burning effect was currently not taking place. "Let them go," Gustav voiced in a low but very strong tone. The Jesadanim found itself slowly releasing its grip around Gradius Anatus and the other lady subconsciously. It made a loud growling sound as the diamond item in its chest area glowed intensely and suddenly shot out a golden beam of destruction. Gustav raised both his arms and crossed them to block the beam that had suddenly blasted forward. Iroh silk grew out of his body and made a covering around him just in time. Bang! He had not expected this and was shot thousands of feet backwards upon collision as the Iroh silk surrounding him shattered to pieces instantly. Gustav slammed into the east side of wall, creating a massive hole within. The power of his Yarki weakened after this hit, and the Jesadanim regained complete control of itself. "It is able to attack with its Yarki?" Gustav said internally as he slowly picked himself out of the hole. It was as if he had not just taken massive damage. His entire body was drenched in blood, and his bones were making loud cracking noises as he slowly pulled himself out. Jesadanim is at the parallel stage of cosmic superiority, the system revealed. That is why it has more cosmic superiority-related abilities. Gustav felt it made sense now. However, what didn't make sense was how Gustav's Yarki was still causing Jesadanim to nearly submit even when Jesadanim was supposed to be at a higher level. Gustav's injuries had begun to heal despite how grievous they were, but the Jesodinim was not interested in giving him time to heal up completely. It had shot out another golden beam. Gustav wanted to move out of the way, but he knew that if he did that, the wall would be destroyed along with everyone standing on it in this particular area. Pa! Slapping his hand on the wall, Iroh silk suddenly spread out from the point of impact to every other part of the wall. As if Gustav wasn't satisfied with this, his body temperature suddenly dropped instantly, and thick frost spread across the wall, acting as another protective barrier. Zing! The Jiko Hakai katana appeared in his grasp in the next instant. He tightened his hands around it and swung in a vertical format. Zwiwind, a large reddish arc, cut across the air, carrying destructive power with it as it headed in the direction of the incoming golden beam. Despite its size being similar to a mountain, the golden beam was at least 10 times more larger than it was. Boom! Both destructive attacks met each other midway, which caused a phenomenon where tiny rifts were formed in mid-air for a bit. The reddish arc contended well with the golden beam and even managed to get rid of it to a certain extent, but the beam was too powerful. Despite reducing in power, it kept shooting forward with intense speed. Swish! At this point, Gustav flew upwards. Bang! The golden beam slammed into the protective layers Gustav had created before the wall and tore through them. It was finally stopped by the main wall after it had lost more than 80% of its power. However, it still managed to blast a hole in the wall. Gustav flew forward, causing Jesodinim to target him. This way the next attack would not be directed at the wall. The diamond-shaped item embedded in its chest glowed up once more as it fired more beams at Gustav. Swish! 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 Fwish! Fortunately, Gustav wasn't taken by surprise this time, so he was able to dodge every single attack despite its immense size. As he flew in the direction of the Jesodinim once more, he let out more energy from his Yarki. Swayayaya! The wave spread from him, once more causing Jesodinim to quickly let out its energy from Yarki as well. Bomb! Both energies clashed once more and began pushing against one another. Everyone in the vicinity felt immensely uncomfortable as the two domineering and irregular energies clashed. The Jesodinim pushed forward as it flung Gradier Xanatus and the other female officer away. It had realized at this point that Gustav was the true threat, so it was willing to do whatever it took to get rid of Gustav. It swung its massive hand forward in a bid to swat Gustav downwards. The Jiko Hakai katana in Gustav's grasp swung out at the same time. Slash! A massive cut was left on the arm of the creature as Gustav flew to the side to dodge the attack. He was still way faster than the creature, and so long as it was using physical attacks, Gustav was sure he would be able to dodge unless he ran out of energy or was preoccupied with something else. Chapter 1004 Fight Lost? Swish! Swish! Slash! Slash! Gustav kept dashing across the place as he repeated left injuries on the body of the creature. Jesodinim was slowly starting to weaken from Gustav's constant pushing with the Yarki. It couldn't understand how Gustav's Yarki was so domineering that his own couldn't match up despite how it was supposed to be stronger. Its tails flew from all direction as it kept throwing attacks at Gustav. Gustav proceeded to grab hold of one of its tails after dodging 3 of the. Just the tip of one of its tails was thrice Gustav's size, yet he managed to make contact. He would have dodged, but he wanted to test out a theory. Kia Chikachu! SS! Jesodinim yelled out as its tail began disintegrating into ashes. This was something atomic disintegration was able to achieve, yet Gustav's Yarki was having such an effect. Looks like it still works, so long as I make contact, Gustav noticed as he held his palm forward. One of Jesodinim's tail had completely burned off at this point. It grew warier of Gustav after Gustav performed that action. The diamond item in its chest glowed up once more as crystallizing purplish shards began growing out of its skin. It began covering the creature from head to toe, which would serve as an armor. Gustav wasn't going to wait around for it to complete this process. He charged forward in mid-air as a massive atomic sword appeared in his grasp. I need more speed and power before it covers its entire body, as well as its injury. Gustav thought in less than a second as an idea appeared in his mind. Activating it might take a lot of energy, but if it's only for an instant, I won't run out of energy, Gustav said internally. Ultimate combination has been activated. His body transformed speedily as he stretched the massive atomic sword forward in the direction of Gisodinum's left shoulder. Suzuan. His figure cut a silver and crimson streak across the air as he instantly arrived before Gisodinum. Thria. A loud, ripping sound rang out as he directly stabbed through the large tear already around the creature's shoulder. Gustav's whole figure tore through, and what was heard in the next instant was a large thump. Bam! Gisodinum's left hand, which was more massive than that of a skyscraper, fell to the ground, causing a land quake from its high mass. It roared loudly in pain as its arm fell off its shoulder. Ashy-colored goo flowed out like a fountain as the creature stepped back subconsciously. The arm that had initially been crystallizing with the purplish shards began to return to normal as its source of power was disconnected. Gustav had finally managed to strike the blow he initially wanted to. With the injury he had inflicted entirely, he was able to successfully sever its arm from its shoulder. Gustav deactivated Ultimate Combination in the next instant, so as to save energy as the massive atomic sword disintegrated as well. Gisodinum swung out once more with its right hand as it noticed Gustav flying towards it. Maneuvering downwards, Gustav dodged and made contact with its arm from underneath. However, now that the rest of its body had been crystallized, it was unaffected by Gustav's touch that would have caused its arm to be turned to ash due to the effect of Yarki. There was only one part of its body that was not covered by this crystalline, purplish shards that acted as armor. Its head, Gustav muttered as he swerved from side to side, dodging the more of the creature's attacks. Gustav flew upwards at this point, surpassing Gisodinum's height in the sky. Fwayai. He kept ascending with intense speed till he had climbed a height of over 100,000 feet. The Gisodinum wondered what Gustav was up to, but with its inability to fly, it couldn't go after Gustav. However, the creature was well capable of leaping high, and it already had the intention of doing so. It still wasn't fast enough as Gustav paused after reaching a particular height in the sky. He turned upside down to face the earth as he activated a skill. Lightning Blitz has been activated. 3 electric arcs were generated as Gustav's figure suddenly blurred. Swoon! His figure disappeared instantly as a lightning arc cut through the sky and appeared 100 miles below instantly. Gisodinum, who was about to leap upwards to go after Gustav, suddenly saw him appear right above him with a weapon in hand. Gustav stabbed downwards with the Jiko Hakai katana the moment he arrived above Gisodinum's head. Thririn! At the same moment, a protective energy phased out of the diamond like item embedded in Gisodinum's chest. A transparent, golden-colored barrier suddenly appeared around Gisodinum's head at the same instant Gustav's blade was about to make contact with its head. Clanging! A loud sound of collision rang out as the Jiko Hakai katana slammed into the barrier. A stream of energy that was sent forth from the katana suddenly redirected back upwards. Boom! The force from the energy of the collision slammed heavily into Gustav, sending him flying backwards as he spiraled in mid-air repeatedly. Bone-cracking sounds rang out as Gustav vomited out a mouthful of blood while still getting blasted backwards from the destructive energy. Gisodinum made another weird sound as cracks appeared all over the protective barrier that surrounded its head at the last second. It ignored that and charged after Gustav's body. Jaira! It yelled out as it raised its hand and grabbed Gustav's body before slamming him into the ground. Boom! Massive shockwaves spread out as infected and officers alike were affected by the impact of Gustav slamming into the ground. It jumped upwards and landed on the exact spot it slammed Gustav into. Boom! This once again created rupturing waves as the creature's attacks caused the earth to split apart. A massive crater had been formed where Gustav's figure was slammed into. Chapter 1005 I Can't Lose Consciousness Right Now. The creature didn't seem satisfied and wreaked even more havoc with its last arm. Bang! 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 Sounds of collision rang out repeatedly as it punched and stomped upon the same area. The crater created had spread across more than 20 miles at this point, and multiple infected along with MBO officers, and even AI bots had fallen into it. Gustav's status was unknown after more than 5 minutes of repeated pounding, but the creature seemed to have been satisfied after doing this continuously, so it finally stopped. The whole place once more descended into silence as the creature stood in place with its golden aura getting stronger with every passing second. It looked forward in the direction of the wall that had cracks all over right now, with multiple parts having holes. It began stepping forward without releasing its Yarki. Its intention was to get rid of the wall now that no one was standing in its way, including the infected. Stomp! 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 With every movement, it crossed more than 100 feet and was getting closer to the wall. It wasn't in a hurry as it moved, but it was still very fast and would get to the wall in less than 10 seconds. Despite only having a single arm currently, Jessudanim would still be capable of ruining the city without anyone to stop it. Gradier Zanatus had repeatedly called for backup since he could still speak even though he was unable to move his body. However, the aircraft that were closing in on the city found themselves unable to move further after reaching the affected areas of both Yarkis. They couldn't attack nor move, so it was useless. The Jessudanim arrived a few feet away from the wall in no time and paused for a bit. Just as it raised its hand, it felt a presence from behind. Hey! It quickly turned around as this familiar voice drifted into its ears, but the moment it did, Puchiai, a 4 feet sword with reddish blades stabbed through what was left of the protective barrier surrounding its head and cut into its forehead. It was merely a needle due to the Jessudanim's large size, but in the next instant it burst forth with immense destructive energy. Hayo! Gustav yelled out as he poured energy into the Jiko Hakai katana and pushed forward as much as he could. Three! A blast of crimson light shone forth as the Jiko Hakai katana ripped through Jessudanim's forehead. Its forehead made a loud sound as Gustav tore further into it and infiltrated the creature's skull. The energy blasted forth into its head wreaked havoc within, and in the next few seconds, Zethii, Jessudanim's golden eyes, slowly turned dim as it fell over. Boom! A loud sound rang out as Jessudanim fell to the back, causing another massive shockwave to spread across the environment. Gustav, who was within its forehead, was holding his breath as his entire body was covered in brain matter and blood. He pulled out the Jiko Hakai katana from a wall section within Jessudanim's brain after he confirmed the creature was dead. He stood in place for several seconds despite knowing that he had won the battle because of an unexpected reason. The source of this content is Frieden, Vel CM. Does host wish to absorb this parallel being cosmic superiority? What is this? I can absorb cosmic superiority? Gustav was pleasantly surprised as he saw this notification. Well, you've never fought a cosmic superior being, so it's understandable that you had no idea you could, the system responded. It didn't make it easy as well. Gustav had to admit that this was the craziest battle he had gotten into. Retract your Yarki, the system stated. Gustav's eyes widened as he realized that his Yarki was still activated. Now that Jessudanim was dead, the full effects of his Yarki would have returned, and everyone on the battlefield would be suffering burns. Zuzhan, he quickly retracted it, causing the entire battlefield to return to normal as everyone found themselves in control of their body functions once more. "I'm almost out of energy," Gustav muttered with a look of urgency. "Are you going to absorb the cosmic superiority, or what?" The system questioned. "Of course," Gustav answered. "So long as it helps me to regain a bit of my energy, because this battle is far from being over," Gustav stated. "Host has decided to absorb this parallel being cosmic superiority. I'm about it helping you to regain your energy." The system voiced with a weird tone. "Absorbing cosmic superiority, huh? What is it?" Gustav had a feeling of foreboding as he heard this. His entire figure brightened up with a golden glow within Gisodinum's head as he began absorbing its cosmic superiority. Gustav began to feel weird as he absorbed Gisodinum's cosmic superiority. "Hey, system, what is it you wanted to mention?" Gustav asked once more with a tone of urgency, as he could feel that something wasn't right. "You'll be losing consciousness in a few." The system revealed. "What?" "No, I can't," Gustav voiced out with a worried tone as he spread his perception across the vicinity. He could tell that the battle between the infect and the officers had continued after he retracted his Yarki. New novel chapters are published on Freeben, Vel CM. "I can't lose consciousness right now," Gustav said with a high tone. "There's nothing you can do about it. Do you know what it means to absorb a parallel being cosmic superiority? You're already defying all the laws of the cosmos, and this is the greatest defiance of all, stopping the cosmic superiority from returning to the cosmos, so another being might be granted with the blessing." The system explained. At this point, Gustav was already starting to get drowsy. No matter how much he tried to fight the sleepiness, his eyelids kept shutting subconsciously. "Stop absorbing. I can do that later." Gustav listed as he staggered while trying to keep himself standing. "I am afraid the process cannot be stopped after it has began," the system disclosed. "See you in 3 days." "Gustav," the system added. TTT, Gustav cursed under his breath before his eyelids closed completely and he fell unconscious. Check out Flames of Desire by Bayvita and add to your library. Chapter 1006 The Weird Internal State of Gisodinum's Skulls. TTT, Gustav cursed under his breath before his eyelids closed completely and he fell unconscious. His body retained its glow after he had fallen face down within the head of the Gisodinum. Yaya! Kairar! Hayo! Outside the Gisodinum's head, battle cries rang out as the MBO resumed their fight against the infected. Every single person had scorch marks on different parts of their bodies due to Gustav's Yarki before he retracted it. Some infected had even been scorched nearly to ashes since some of them didn't have bodies that were as sturdy as that of the MBO. Gradier Xanatus flew across the battlefield, occasionally hurling down attacks as he charged forward. "Gustav!" he yelled out as he flew across the air while looking down. All he could see from up here was the devastation caused by the battle between Gustav and the Gisodinum. Earth had split to the point where one would wonder if this was a battle between two beta ranked. There were craters all over the place that extended to even the borders of Gildian City behind. Both infected and MBO officers had lost their lives due to the fight between these two, and even the wall that were erected around the city had nearly been torn down completely. Everyone witnessed these two put everyone in a state where they were unable to move throughout the duration of their battle. Gustav, who was supposed to be an Echo, ranked, battled with a mixed breed, was so powerful in the past, and had its power even boosted by the infection, yet he still came out on top. An infected mixed breed that was beyond level 100, yet an Echo ranked mixed blood won against it, whereas Kilo and Delta ranked mixed bloods were unable to intervene. Gradier Xanatus had so many unanswered questions running through his mind, and one of them involved how Gustav was able to use the same type of power Gisodinum was mostly feared for, and even used it in a more powerful state. However, even if he had these questions, he knew he would never be able to get any answers if Gustav remains missing. The infected were not going to wait or give them chance to do a proper search, so Gradier Xanatus took it upon himself to find Gustav. The battle was won, but Gradier Xanatus feared it was not without a cost, especially after Gustav's presence disappeared the moment Gisadanim met his end. The female officer that had initially joined them had gone back to battling the infected. Just because Gisadanim had been unexpectedly taken care of didn't mean the fight was over. Gisadanim was just one part of the threat. The other part was not any less dangerous, since there were more than 6 million infected pushing their way forward in a bid to overrun the city. Gustav, Gradier Xanatus, yelled out once more as he headed towards the corpse of the Gisadanim. He suddenly recalled something as he closed in on the gigantic corpse in the distance. The source of this content is F.O. The infected come back to life if their bodies are not properly gotten rid of, he said internally before flying and landing on the head of the corpse. We need to completely disintegrate its body. Gradier Xanatus yelled out to those on the wall. The officers on the walls with abilities that were capable of completely getting rid of Gisadinim's body began to jump down from the wall. As Gradier moved around its head area, he noticed that there was a glow coming from the hole that was created in Gisadinim's forehead. Everyone knew the cause of this hole was Gustav's killing blow, but no one knew he never came out of it. Gustav, Gradier Xanatus spotted the unconscious figure laying within the massive hole on the forehead of the creature. Ashy goo was still pouring out of the forehead like a fountain, and some flowed over Gustav as his glowing unconscious body just laid there. Gradier Xanatus quickly moved in and tried to retrieve Gustav's glowing unconscious body. He lifted Gustav over his shoulder and headed out the hole, but then he noticed he was unable to get past the entry point. What is happening? He wondered out loud as he felt himself getting stopped by an invisible force. Gradier Xanatus put Gustav down and swung his palm forward. He had expected to get stopped by the invisible force, but this time his hand moved past the entry point freely. A look of confoundment appeared on Gradier Xanatus' face as he picked Gustav up once more and tried to make his way out. Zoom! He was stopped by the invisible force once more. Gradier Xanatus placed Gustav's glowing body down once more, and the same result as earlier repeated itself. Unfortunately, no matter how much Gradier Xanatus tried to get Gustav's body out of the creature's head, it was to no avail. New novel chapters are published on Freewebn. Welcome. He had even tried creating another exit point, but it brought about the same results. At this point, Gradier Xanatus was sure that something was going on, and he attributed it to the glow on Gustav's body. He noticed that as time passed, Gustav's unconscious body was crystallizing with golden shards. Whatever is happening to him right now, I'm sure it's not negative, Gradier Xanatus could tell as he scrutinized Gustav's frame. He decided to move out at this point. Do not touch the creature till the glow there has dimmed. After it does, retrieve Officer Crimson's body and keep him somewhere safe, Gradier Xanatus voiced out before turning around to head back into the battlefield. The 9 officers that had just dropped from the wall to take care of this task had looks of confusion on their faces as Gradier Xanatus moved further away from here. However, a command was a command, and they had no right to question it at such a crucial moment when they knew Gradier Xanatus had to busy himself with preventing the infected from breaching the wall. And Bjorkampen, a grassy-filled field void of people. I must say you did a splendid job. You're tuning in to the Thunderspear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.